This conference will now be recorded.
At 3:04, I called this special city council meeting and regular city council meeting to order at the Byers Building. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Lumpy,
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Salceda,
Here.
Councilmember McClellan,
Present.
Councilmember Smith,
Present.
Councilmember Barron,
Present.
Councilmember Devine, present. We have a quorum.
Great. Please join me in saying the pledge.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I have a few announcements. First, I just wanted to welcome our new court clerk who started last Monday. Her name is Amber Bennett, and we are looking forward to having her at City Hall with us. Another announcement is we have been approved for a .gov domain. So in the future, we will be changing our website and everything to a City of Blanco, Texas.gov. The Twin Sisters Raise the Roof fundraiser is this weekend, September 24th through the 25th. And there is presently no burn ban. Public comments? Do we have any public comments today?
Thank you.
We have a Mac McKellott.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to address our group. My name is Gary Matt McElligott, and I represent the American Legion Post 352 here in Blanco, Texas. My purpose here today is to confirm that the American Legion will conduct the Veterans Day Parade on November 13th, 2021. The parade route would be the usual from the high school around the town square, returning to the high school. We plan to begin the parade at 9 o'clock in the morning with staging beforehand as directed by Mr. Carl Struck. We plan to begin the parade, and Carl has performed the preliminary coordination, by the way, with Officer Jerry. Thank you. Jerry Cornell. Additional inquiries regarding the Veterans Day Parade can be directed to Carl at our post telephone number. That telephone number is 830-443-2862. Again, 830-443-2862. Thank you again for your time.
What was the date again on that?
That would be November the 13th, Saturday morning at 9 o'clock.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Susan Moore.
Can I speak now or can I speak on the item? When the item comes up on the agenda. I'm speaking specifically to two items.
Let's speak now, please.
So I have 3 minutes for both items, right? Since it's on the agenda. Okay, so the first one I'll speak to you about is the item on agenda number 2 in new business. And we're talking about the fee service ordinance that Bonnie will be bringing forward you. In a city council meeting on August the 10th, the public works director having the property owner pay for any water meter box damage and the city would be responsible for the meter itself, which is installed inside the box. The city determines where the water meter box is. This determines how it installs the box, and when it's on city property, not on property owner's property, on city property, I object to the property owner being held responsible for the damages to the box or the meter bid. A property owner has no authority and cannot protect anything on city property. This is an undue burden put on a property owner who cannot protect against this damage and therefore should not be held responsible for the charges or the repairs. The city should be responsible for all damages on repairs to equipment installed on and retained on city property, including the water meter box. We can't do anything about it. I have everything option to tell you where you put that box. If it's on my property, I could be responsible for it. And on mine, it is, it's on the city property, outside of my property. I can't tell you what to do. And then on item number 14, that, on the ordinance relating to the new ordinance on permanent expiration and project financing. I would like to know if this is going to override any current ordinances and any UDC regulations which are currently in effect. If so, which ones? Because in the UDC, when we talk about that, UDC chapter 5.9, item 9, and in UDC 3.7, item 2.d, it speaks to that. So is it going to override it, update it? What is it going to do with it? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Paul Bramford?
Well, I'm here for a budget request. Is that the time to do that?
I'll call you. Not yet.
Oh, it's not yet?
Not
Okay.
yet.
All right. I'll do
Thank
it.
you. Retta Martin, same. And Crystal, same. Roxanne, same. Okay, well then, we are going to go ahead and move on to the presentation.
I have a citizen's comment.
Oh.
It's supposed to be read.
Okay. Sorry.
Dear Mayor Lumpy, Acting City Administrator Kelly Kinsler, and members of the City of Blanco City Council. This letter is being written and submitted by me, Chris Anderson, in my individual capacity and not on behalf of the Blanco Planning and Zoning Commission, of which I am a commissioner, nor on behalf of Blanco Wheels and Feet, of which I am a secretary. The issue herein addresses the concern I have with regards to a land use agreement for B Street, which is pending on the City Council agenda. While I have no information on the purpose of the agreement, this seems like an opportune time to make this suggestion for your serious consideration. I strongly suggest that the City of Blanco retain or otherwise provide for its residents, citizens, and visitors the rights to access and use city-owned streets and ways for future recreational purposes. Whether dealing with the development of, sale of, disuse of, closing of, or discontinuance or abandonment of any city-owned streets and ways, I suggest the City of Blanco keep, perhaps in the form of a deed restriction, easement, or right-of-way, recreational use of the streets and ways in which it now holds or subsequently may obtain ownership and title. Recreational purposes I am thinking of might include paved and unpaved, yet groomed, nature trails, public walking paths, bike paths, and possible ADA HC paths. As the city grows and changes, you may not again have an opportunity such as this in which to save and set aside these protections for future use of our valuable city land. I hope you will give this suggestion your earnest attention and serious consideration. Thank you, Christine Anderson.
Thank you. Are there any public comments online? Okay. We are going to move on to presentation, the community aid requests. So Mr. Gramberg.
Thank you. I'm Paul Gramberg, Blanco County Commissioner Precinct 4, and also Blanco County Recycling Coordinator. And I'm here to request some funding for the Blanco County Recycle Center, which I know many of you utilize and many citizens of the city utilize. Recycling is a program that, it's a feel-good program, it's a good program, people utilize it, they like it, but it's a highly subsidized program. There's, the only way to have a successful program is somebody's got to subsidize it. Well, Blanco County has been doing that. This year, we budgeted $65,600 to operate the center. And what I am asking is some help from the city in the amount of $5,000
to help subsidize the operation. We do generate some revenue from the sale of the commodities, but it doesn't come anywhere close to covering the expenses. And one of the bigger expenses this year, we had to budget an additional $8,000 to maintain the glass recycling operation. We're one of the few centers who continue to take glass. And what we've been able to do is find a transporter that for a discounted rate will provide transportation. If we collect it, he'll provide transportation to a center in Austin where it is recycled. We did have to eliminate the plastic a couple of years ago because it was just cost prohibitive and it was going to the landfill. Even after we processed it, delivered it to a recycling place, they said, we'll take it, but we're going to charge you, and it's going to the landfill. So that was the reason for discontinuing. But we're still continuing collecting items that are profitable, mainly cardboard, newspaper, but we do have to subsidize the newspaper. We do have to pay to get it. It is recycled, but we do have to pay a processor to take it. But we do generate some revenue with cardboard, aluminum, steel. So that's all I'm asking for, is just a little help to keep us afloat and keep the center in operation in the amount of $5,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Retta Martin?
Okay, I'm up here for two different things, so I'm just doing both at the same time, right? Keep Blanco Beautiful is one of them, and I think everybody knows Keep Blanco Beautiful. I always wear my shirts in here because we have been here since 1999, when I got off, I retired and got on the city council myself and said, let's clean Blanco up. And the mayor looked at me and said, will you take it? And I said, yes. And we had another council person that the two of us worked together, and Judy Darcet. So y'all are familiar with us. We have 9 committees, and the most visual is beautification because they're in QC, they're working down at the park. But we have education. Education is our main thing. Even that is education. For the park is education. All we're asking on this is $2,000 because we do other fundraising too. We do membership, business memberships. Patron is 150, business 75, and another one for $300. And so I have come up with as much as 4,000, sometimes it's 2,000. And I'm the one that likes to go out and shake hands with everybody and see them face to face because we get to talk about Blanco and they love it and I love it and what we can do for it. But we also go to the schools. We have a lot of things at school. And we have enforcement. We want to work with the chief and the police department on when we see code enforcement. That's one of our big things is code enforcement. Recycling is one of our committees. And so that's all that one is asking for. That part of KBB is asking for is $2,000. And so the other part of the KBB request is streetscape. I think that you all have heard about streetscape, but I don't think everybody knows where streetscape came from. You hear a lot of things about the comprehensive master plan. Connie talked a lot about the comprehensive master plan because that's what in 2003 the citizens asked Jim Roderick, our mayor, let's do a comprehensive master plan. And so we know where we're going in 10, 20 years and where we'll be in 10 or 20 years. So we got together and had a lot of fun meetings to see if it was really of interest here, and we did it. And so we contracted with LCRA and to do the comprehensive master plan because Chris Polkamp. And then PEC joined in to help do it with Heather Richardson. And our first meeting was held at Bobby Mack's office. He was on our council. He was our liaison on the council. And well, actually he was on the steering committee. And Chris looked at me and said, right, but I recommend that you have the city apply for the Visionary Preservation Program. For the city, that was called VIP. It was a fairly new program. Castroville was a pilot town, and only 3 times a year could get that. And so the VHP did request for that. Our first application was done to Candy Cargill, let it. She was the chair, and she let it. It was declined. The second one was I let it, and it's the hardest application we ever worked on. We had shown that Blanco, they wanted us to prove that the city chair and that the administration was going to support it. So we were turned down from 2004, we were turned down, 2005, we were turned down. And they finally gave it to us in 2007, but during that time, we had become sort of our local government. We had to update our historic preservation program. We had to rewrite our ordinance, and it took 2 years to get that all done and passed. And the reason I'm telling you this is that this is part of the comprehensive master plan. It's just, he said it will help walk alongside and make the comprehensive master plan work. And I'm telling you this because you're familiar with night friendly skies. That was one of the tasks in here, you know, when God's out, night friendly skies. But then another one was to design and develop and implement design standards, incentives, and timeframe penalties for compliance for historic fabric and new development. We hear this being talked about. Let's do design guidelines, standards now. Development and implement the signage standards. That was number 1. Debbie Hunmar was over that. That's part of this. It came up here. We didn't have it before then. That was number 1. One of them. Identify and design gateways in keeping with Blanco character. The Historic Commission is working on that right now. That came out of here.
Ms. Martin, that was the timer.
Oh, okay. I thought that you said 5 minutes on that one.
It was 5 minutes.
It was 5 minutes.
Sorry.
Okay. I don't have much on that one.
Just a little.
Okay, because state gateways is in here. And that started for the historic, to come up with a master plan for the historic district. And we have been working on that. It came out of here. It was my task to do, and we've been working since 2010 on it. So the way Kid Blanco Vehicle comes into it, we had money of $6,000 to be applied for this. And we are asking the city to match that with $6,000 for the master plan. And we have selected the master planner. So I could adverse with the group, with our board, and then y'all approved what we selected. It was Main Street architects. So we have, and we were asking $7,000 to match ours. $1,000 of that is just for the money that it costs to make brochures and all that kind of stuff. And we now have our information from Main Street, and so we can get going on this. Thank you. I needed a time.
Thank you. Crystal?
Thank you, Mayor and City Council, for having this opportunity to speak with you. I have sent in a letter kind of explaining our history with y'all. Y'all want further background. Whenever the library was founded in 1938, we were a private library. And in 1998, our foundation that created our library made an agreement with the city for an annual contribution to help support services for its citizens. In 2001, library districts were formed, and we worked out an agreement to continue our MOU until the expiration of 2009. And since then, we have come annually to request $15,000 to support services. And As of this time, we have 2 full-time employees, 5 part-time employees, and 15 volunteers. We have registered over 150 new City of Blanco patrons this year, and over 300 Blanco City residents review their accounts this year. And we have over 1,900 active City of Blanco and just right outside City of Blanco limits patrons. We have databases available for homework. We provide a safe space for students and families to meet. We have private study rooms for people to use. And now that we're open back to our 44 hours, we are now allowing rentals of our community space. And this year we have implemented a fine-free and a fine forgiveness program because we didn't want to do undue hardship on low-income families. So everything we're doing, we're trying to support the community in every way we can. And we're here for you. If you need to use our facilities, there was a time that during your renovation here that we allowed meetings at our space. Do y'all have any questions or any clarification you would like from us?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Rao?
Thank you, Mayor Lucky and City Council. Good afternoon. I'm Roxanne Sorrell, and I am the chairman of the Blanco Historic Preservation Commission. I am here today to advocate for funding for the BHPC in the amount of at least $3,500, which was our budget last year. Your local Historic Preservation Commission exists to protect our historic district and landmarks, foster civic pride, and tell our town's story, and protect and enhance attractiveness to visitors who contribute to the local economy when they spend money at our local businesses here on the square. Having a local historic preservation commission is a requirement to maintain Blanco's status as a certified local government, which is something that Ms. Ruddy just mentioned. Certified local governments are eligible for grants for various projects through the National Park Service and the Texas Historic Commission. Currently, the bulk of the Historic Preservation Commission's budget goes to professional memberships, operating costs, and required education for commissioners. Our goals for the next year include revisions and reprinting of our guides to the historic district, gateway signs welcoming people to historic Blanco, which is a project that Keep Blanco Beautiful is also involved in, an educational kiosk on the square, a historic marker for the Pittsburgh side of town, and starting an update of our survey of historic structures in town. This is supposed to be done approximately every 10 years. I think it's been at least 20 years. So anything in town that's over 50 years old, we would want to have a record of, not necessarily to declare it a marker, but just so that we have an inventory. So now we're looking at structures that were built in the early 70s that we don't have on our survey. Of course, this is just the beginning of our wish list, but all of these things cost money. Supporting preservation and education about the history of Blanco is a long-term investment in the future of our town. Myself and my fellow commissioners look forward to continuing to serve our community by serving as a resource and preserving Blanco's character. Thank you for your consideration and welcome any questions.
What was the amount that you?
$3,500. And that's the amount that we had last year. Some of the projects on our wish list would cost more. Some of the grants that we would like to apply for would require matching funds, and we have not included that in the $3,500.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have any representative from CARTS at this time? Is there anybody here for the Hill Country Children Advocacy Center? Okay. We are going to move on to the presentation, TLAP versus TPDES permitting considerations. Nick Dornak.
Good afternoon, Mayor Lumpy and council members. Good to be back in Blanco. Good afternoon. It's very complimentary of this scheduling today. Yes, my name is Nick Dornak. I'm the Director of Watershed Services with the Meadows Center for Water and the Environment, and I have been serving as the facilitator for the Blanco Water Reclamation Task Force. Today, the purpose of my presentation is to give you an update on a study we commissioned following our directive from City Council to look at more costs associated with a no discharge land application permit future for the city of Blanco versus a discharge permit application, which is what you currently have in the queue, TCDQ. The report and all of the nuances and logistics that would go into the city having all the information you need to make a really informed and good decision, which is incredibly important. I don't feel it's where it needs to be at this point. It's very close. So I wanted to give an update for you. So we're maybe 75% of the way there. When I come back, we'll have a task force meeting in the interim before the next opportunity to present. And at that point, we would present some recommendations and hopefully have discussion and action on a path forward for the city of Blanco. So my hope for today would be to let you know where we stand. We've got a lot of great information at this point in the report. And if there's any questions or needs the city would have, I would love to hear that as well so that we can incorporate those and make sure that we have a good solid report with all the information you need to make a good decision. So just to recap, on July 17th, the Blanco Water Reclamation Task Force presented our findings and recommendations for the city of Blanco. The first recommendation was to pursue a phased Texas land application permit. That particular recommendation was tabled, which is where we are today. What was voted on unanimously and approved was that the city would like to double the on-site storage capacity at your facility, to obtain more land leases for irrigation, and continue to support the task force with participation as we move into a phase 2, which is a more longer-term comprehensive look at sustainable water management for the city of Blanco, a one water strategy. So to let you know some of the components of the report, and this again was commissioned through Aqua Strategies, who provided a lot of the engineering analysis in the first report. This current report has been done in some coordination with your engineer, Tom Turk and Freeland Turk. The report looks at costs associated with the land application permit or a discharge permit at a 0.225 million gallons per day level. And you see at the bottom here, oh, sorry, why don't you go on to the next
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why it's not coming up there. I'm sorry.
It's like,
I'm just gonna blame it on Jerry, but still.
oh, something changed.
Yeah.
Something green. Is that one there?
See, I've got your slide too right here. You might not know about this stuff when I do make it. I'm open to suggestions.
Is it in slideshow?
It was.
But it's refusing to kick in the slideshow.
Probably do it without sharing screen, but see what I mean? It's not. Now you're just as confused as we are.
Well, that's all right. I can roll. We'll try to keep it quick. I'll try to hit the high points here and we have.
Okay, you do have it.
The one that you have is not from today. That's the old one. So I've added few details. I'm sure we can get you the fresh copy.
Lonnie, one on there was a PowerPoint and one was a PDF.
Yes, I'm on the PowerPoint.
Okay, okay.
If you pull up the PDF, it might work, or maybe you can catch up with me. So getting back to where we were, we looked at a 0.22 million gallons per day cost estimate. That is in your current permit application through Mr. Turk, what the estimated discharge capacity or the treatment capacity would have to be in about 10 years, in 2030. So that's your horizon in terms of where you would be at by 2030. And we try to compare apples to apples there with the discharge path and some storage versus a no discharge land application. Well, it's clear, and Mr. Turk brought up these concerns at the last meeting, would be that there would be some additional permitting costs with the land application permit versus a discharge permit, which you've already paid for, basically. We're estimating those costs, and I'll show you the table if we can get it up here, at about an additional $60,000 to do the permitting for a land application permit. What that entails, particularly, would be the lands that you would be irrigating on. You would have to do some soil analysis and some additional work in order to incorporate that into the permit. That's your main administrative hurdle in the land application permit, in addition to the intensity. Oh, we're getting close. Got it. All right, let's go to the next slide. There we go. So in addition to the types of land acquisition or leases that would be required in a land application permit, because the city has to have control. So your lease would need to be at least 7 years of the life of the permit. So there might be some more intensive requirements on the leasing. The land application permit, in order to ensure that there are no discharges or runoff onto adjacent property, those types of things, it's going to require additional storage for TCEQ to approve it and additional irrigation lands for TCEQ to approve it. That also means that there's a lot more oversight in terms of what the city's seeing and reporting, and what TCEQ is seeing and reporting in terms of how your operations are going, which can also limit some, operator issues and things like that. The discharge, the TPDES, we're just going to call them discharge and no discharge, that does require a discharge path. So land application, you do not need a ditch, you do not need a pipeline. You've got enough storage and enough irrigation that based on historic data, you will never need to, the water never needs to leave that site and hit the river. With the discharge permit, no matter how much storage you have, no matter how much land you're irrigating, you have to have a path to the river. And under your current settlement agreement at this point with Bar Paradise, that would require the addition of the discharge pipeline. The other piece of this, and I don't want to gloss over this because I think it is one of the reasons that this task force was commissioned, is that moving forward with the discharge permit and the lack of controls in terms of what the city can do in terms of discharges and times, you will face significant risk of costly litigation. And there's a City of Austin Watershed Department report basically looking at those costs, estimating those at around 1.3 million for a similar type of situation where you've got litigants on both sides. So that is factored in. It has not been finalized. This is something we're going to keep working on. The operation and maintenance costs are roughly the same for both, because with the discharge permit, there's a lot of monitoring going in, especially if you're discharging. You've got to do a lot more monitoring. You've got to do more treatment on your effluent. With the land application permit, there's still monitoring. There's annual look at soils. So every year you have to go to those areas that you're irrigating, take a soil core and make sure that the nutrients are all there. But again, that's also ensuring proper land management, proper irrigation application. So we feel like that is an environmentally sound practice. As it comes out, the costs of each of these are basically equal because in terms of once you got your permit to keep them going, it's negligible on the cost. The report as it's written assumes land acquisition for both scenarios at equal cost for the city of Blanco. The report as it's written basically says 0 or net positive for the city to acquire these lands, and it's basically looking at leases, not land purchases. Land purchases is looking at maybe like $30,000 an acre. That would be a lot of money. So what we want to do is take advantage of the lands around that could be irrigated under either scenario, whether you've got a discharge permit or a land application permit. What is lacking, as I mentioned, is a step-by-step analysis and instructions for the city, and that's what we hope to provide soon. So the current status, you've got an application in up to 0.45 million gallons per day. One thing I want to point out that maybe just to refresh everyone's memory, there's an engineering addendum in there prepared by Freeland Turk that provides a water balance and shows the city's commitment to 0 discharge in that current permit. And I have the water balance I'm going to show you on the next slide, but that is the commitment that the city made and presented to TCEQ in the current permit with that engineering addendum was a commitment to no discharge. You're currently treating about 0.14 million gallons per day, 140,000 gallons a day. Your existing storage is 9 million gallons. You've got about 26 acres that you're irrigating right now. Your ponds are unlined, not able to maintain the type 1 effluent quality that your plant is actually able to produce. Am I saying that correctly, Ronnie?
I'm sorry, let's just go.
That's all right. Your plant can produce type 1, your ponds cannot maintain it.
Maintain.
Okay. Chapter 210 reuse authorizations, those are very simple leases where you can basically just send water to people and they can irrigate. That provides some very simple ways to get rid of that water right now, but they're not under those authorizations. It's how you guys decide to negotiate your time and frequency and those kinds of things. So in TCEQ's mind, it doesn't really offset your ability to discharge or not discharge as much. And as you know, recent operations, we had a couple of problems recently with some overland flow into Far Paradise. We've got, and I think that just demonstrates really kind of the lack of storage that you have right now and the lack of plan that you have available. So really, I'll tell you all of this, and what I'm going to say is the land that you guys are working and negotiating on, getting irrigated, that needs to happen yesterday. So really, I'd like to get it. I don't think that we had an update on that lease that you were working on yet. It's still kind of pending, and that was 45 acres?
Up to
45 acres. But that's a heck of a start. If we can get that, that would be huge. That would be huge. Under Mr. Turk's analysis, really, he had looking at 60 acres of land available for irrigation at 0.225. But what that required for a no discharge scenario under his water balance and permit, and I'm sorry, this is a little bit fuzzy because I just grabbed it out of the permit, but it requires, if you see, 92 acre feet. 2030, 92 acre feet, 60 acres of storage. 92 acre feet is 29.98 million gallons. I put that at the bottom here on this slide. So that's about 20 million gallons more than you have, which is what was basically assessed for 60 acres. That's doable. It's a large pond, but this is what the city is in the city's permit application right now. This is not binding. This is a commitment to this level of storage and irrigation. So I just wanted to show this as a comparison. Our water balance in the report is fairly similar. It's a little bit more conservative than Mr. Turk's and really tries to focus on getting more land and a little bit less storage to achieve these things because land, if you can lease it, costs a lot less than big holes in the ground that are lined and those kinds of things. So scenario one in the report, in the draft report as it's written, what we're looking at in terms of permitting costs, construction costs, administrative fees, the whole shebang in terms of getting the pond built. The 15.4 million gallon additional pond is going to cost 1.86 million. That includes a very significant contingency of 25%. So we're talking a very conservative number.
And that includes land cost,
That includes, excuse me,
land cost.
that would be assuming that this is built on your available land, whether it's on your 26 acres you're irrigating or your current spot that you have. So that does not include land costs. Neither scenario do. I do not recommend. I don't think anyone necessarily recommends buying land for storage, but we need to acquire land for irrigation. That would be the most bang for your buck on it. We're recommending 200 acres of land for irrigation, but as you'll see on the next slide, the more storage you build, the less land you need. And it's really interesting because once you get to a certain point, you realize that and I'll just show you, I'll just skip to it. Once you get to about an additional 18 million gallons and 100 irrigation acres, which is, you see this, the second vertical line there where that dot crosses, right there. You get diminishing returns from the amount of land that you add on, but so you could get a lot. Let's say you built an 18 million gallon pond. This is something I want to flesh out a little bit more in the final report. You could work that with 100 acres of irrigation lands, but it's still a lot cheaper to get a lease for 100 acres than it is to build another 3 million gallons of storage. So this is what we're trying to do and recommend a really nice sweet spot for the city. But I just wanted to show you that you definitely get diminishing returns. And the reason for that is, and you see how it really flattens out after you get to 100 acres? The reason for that is your pond can't really get much smaller than that because of the winter months, because you cannot irrigate like you would in the summer. So you've got to be able hold so much of that water that you're producing in the winter months. So that's really your minimum, right? It's 15 million gallons. And if you had 200 acres or 1,000 acres, it wouldn't make a whole lot of difference for you. But that's how these water balances work. You got to be able to hold on to that water in the winter so that you can irrigate with it in the spring, summer, and fall. Right now, it's recommending 200 acres. That's kind of where we're at in terms of cost balance. Also, we want to maintain type 1 effluent in a new pond so that you can sell that water for industrial uses, commercial uses, those kinds of things at a higher rate than you can your current effluent. Finally, the capacity would be phased in as the city is currently producing 140,000 gallons per day. The cost sheet is here. I don't think that's in your current, but again, we'll get you this. In the final report, it will have all of this. So this is the cost sheet for the 15.4 million gallon additional line pond. The scenario 2 looks at the same amount of treatment capacity, 0.225. Sorry, Ronnie. I did. I keep forgetting.
Okay.
I'm not showing you what's on there. Okay. The scenario 2 looks at a discharge permit. Looks at basically what you've got now with the addition of 9.2 million gallons of storage, in keeping with the city's commitment to do everything you can to eliminate discharge. But this presents more of a flexible option in terms of what an engineer might recommend in terms of what's the best type of balance for you. The cost of going down this path from where you are right now would be essentially the cost of the pond, that it's including the contingency, just like the other one, the engineering, the cost to construct the discharge pipeline, which is required, Recommended treatment upgrades for those times that you do have to discharge, but you don't want to add those extra nutrients into the Blanco River. And in the new pond, that it would maintain a type 1, chapter 210 reuse. That's in this $1.63 million figure. That's about $200,000 less than the land application figure. What that 1.63 million does not include are potential litigation costs, which are basically sunk costs legally. The other thing I would also recommend that the city look into, and we'll have a little more analysis on this, is that there's a chance that even if you take it down the path of litigation and contested case, you may not get your permit, as what happened with Dripping Springs, where right now they're on the wrong side of that decision and their permit was remanded back. They were not able to pass it. Silver Springs Alliance, or Silver Springs, was able to convince the district court judge that their permit did not keep with the Clean Water Act. So that's the current legal standing right now for a contestant of your permit. So that's the risk. This is the cost sheet associated with that 1.63 million. Oh, sorry. Ronnie, you're on top of it. Now we got it consistent. You will see there at the bottom, your engineering, your subtotal is at 880, 300. That's for all your construction. But then we include the nutrient reduction costs of about 200,000, and that outfall to across Farm Paradise, where right now the city is capped at $200,000, but would have to do that to comply with your settlement agreement. So that's what we did at this point. So what we want to do is some additional scenarios and analysis for you to present this very clearly side by side. Develop a phased approach for the city for either path that you want to go down. And we will be with you, whatever path you go down, to help you make the best decisions. And then what's really key at this point is, and I've spoken with Councilmember Barron on this recently, is it's really the complex logistics of making either one of these paths work. You've got potential contested case threats on one side, you've got a settlement agreement, you've got things that you want to do that aren't paid for yet in either case, whether it's a storage pond, a smaller storage pond or a larger storage pond, and you've got to get your land acquired so that you can actually apply for this permit. So all of this has to be done, and you've got TCEQ putting pressure on the city also to get a permit in. So what I'm just for argument's sake, what I wanted to present right now would be a potential that I want to examine over the next couple of weeks, would be the potential to have a hybrid permit where you start out with a discharge permit so you can keep operating under your current system and try to get as much land as we can right away. That's chapter 210, but a time limit, a deadline that says we need to have our ponds and our land for a TLAP by a certain time. And then, so it usually goes the other way. Usually have TLAP and it might be hybrid on the top side. This would be discharge and hybrid on the TLAP side, on the high side of the TLAP. So it gives you basically, potentially would give you time to operate under your current system. There may be some discharges. I really, frankly, looking at the numbers and where your ponds are and land you have, it's going to be very hard for the city to avoid discharge this winter. I'm not seeing it in the cards, so we'll have to deal with that. But what we want to do is get you on that path so you feel comfortable with Farm Paradise. So Farm Paradise feels like they're going to be taken care of. Downstream landowners feel like the river is going to be clean for them to enjoy and not affect them, and that the city is sticking by your commitment. We're down this path. We can't look in it when we can learn from the past, but we can't change the past. So right now, we just want to make the best decisions that we can for you guys. And either way, it's going to require a little bit of money, which I'm really glad to see that the city got the project information forms into Water Development Board. Let's see if we can grease the U.S. Senate a little bit to pass an infrastructure bill and see some money flowing on that end. But just wanted to give you guys an update. I hope this was thorough enough and clear enough to help you understand where you're at. I think there is a path. Like I said, it's thread and needle, either way you go. And hope you can make the best decision. And if there's any questions that you might have that you would like to see, either ask me now, or you can follow up with the email, or I can speak as well.
Nick, I just wanted to thank Nick and everybody that's on this task force. It's been amazing. This is an incredibly complicated process, and the patience with trying to educate me about the difference between a 210 reuse and a TLAP and TCEQ has been wonderful, but it's a big deal. And it's really about planning now for where we're going to be going in the future. It's all about future planning to do things right. But thank you, Nick and the Meadow Center, for all your resources and all of your help on this. Appreciated it. Couldn't imagine it without you guys.
All right, Nick, I want to say the same thing, that we appreciate your efforts and all the people that serve on this committee and all the different entities that are involved in it. I think your presentation gives us, I'm a number guy. So I'm also environmental, but I'm more of a number guy. That's just the way it is. So everybody's got their strong suit. I will question one thing. When it came up for vote, and there were 4 of the 5 items that passed. In my opinion, the other one failed because it was not supported by a motion. But it doesn't say, that's not to say we wouldn't entertain this at a later time. So just for a clarification, and that's my opinion, not our attorneys. The other item is your information on litigation costs was beneficial to me, and I thank you for that.
And we can provide you a copy. We will provide a copy of that report from Austin Marshall Department that was done, a very deep analysis on litigation on these, based on this article.
And I'm just gonna ask one other thing, because I'm sure you're looking out for us on this. But there's a lot of grant money out there on water, wastewater, and while we did put in our PIFs, and we hope some of that will come down, we understand, and I understand that the National Wildlife Federation's biggest issue is water reuse. Meadow Center is very generous and supportive of that. We know more places out there than we do about folks who would look at this and go, oh my gosh, this is a great project, and if we can help, we want to help. So I'm sure you're looking out for.
I'm definitely putting in plugs. We've got a couple of proposals in to continue that long-term comprehensive study for you, and a very likely funding proposal from the Pisces Foundation that would fund my continued involvement in this project for at least another year. So yeah, I work in the world of soft money, so I'm always chasing those numbers. But thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure.
First of all, thank you. I echo everything they said, and as mentioned,
Yeah.
okay, I'm sorry, I can't see you. Okay. Thank you, and it's been very educational for me to be part of the task force, even though I feel like I'm always just trying to catch up. But here's something I've never heard brought up in this conversation, and I'm just, what if we weren't asking for 450 gallons? What if that number was a smaller number? It's basically doubling what our previous or current, however you want to call it, permit is. What would be the implications of not going up 100%, but going up 50%?
Well, I think generally that's a planning decision based on kind of a planning horizon where you don't want to have to go in and redo your permit every couple of years. And so you certainly, you started at 1.6, right? A couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And that was deemed to be, far more than was necessary. So the compromise position was more of 450,000 gallons with a phased approach. So your phased approach, I think, covers that. I don't think from a contestant standpoint, I don't know that a 225 or, whatever it is, 0.225, 225,000 gallons or 450,000 gallons of discharge, how much difference that's going to make in terms of how they would feel about it. But a commitment that's codified in a permit, maybe with timelines and things like that, I think that's what makes it more. Your current permit has this engineering analysis, and basically you're presenting to TCEQ that you stand by this, desire to add more storage and land, but there's no money associated. I mean, Blanco has not, to my knowledge, really made efforts to acquire the funding for that at that point. So it's more of a handshake, I guess. The TCEQ cannot hold you to that in the permit, and that's going to be what the focus will be in any kind of potential litigation. But that said, again, this current study that we're working on, this is coming with support from, potential downstream folks that would have a problem with it. So the idea that again, the point of this, and I think is to flesh that question out. So let's ask that at the task force meeting that we have to finalize recommendations based on this report. I think that's a good question to ask. So I don't want to speak for the whole group. That's kind of my thought. It's more about what you're putting down on paper that you will do, rather than, we're only going to discharge, this much, not this much. So.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to stay for the show.
You have a boring life.
This is easier than my 4-year-old.
We're going to move on to the consent agenda. And the following items may be acted upon in one motion. 1, approval of the appointment of Mayor Rachel Lumpy as the CAPCOG General Assembly Representative. 2, consideration and approval of the August 10th, 2021 regular meeting minutes. 3, consideration and approval of the September 17th, 2021 special meeting minutes. 4, consideration and possible action on the relocation of the Blanco City Council meetings to the Gym of the Hills until further notice due to the rising COVID numbers. And 5, resolution 2021 R011 to consider and possibly adopt COVID-19 guidelines. Is there a motion?
Mayor, on the consent agenda items, I make a motion that we approve items 1 through 5 as stated.
Councilmember Smith has moved to approve items 1 through 5. Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Barron has seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. We are going to move on to new business. And before we get started, I just want to tell council that I am going to move item 5 till after executive session. So item 5 is going to be after executive session. Number 1, discussion and possible action on amendment to City of Blanco's reclaimed water rates. Ms. Chancellor.
Good afternoon, Mayor Council. Go to the next slide, Maureen. Thank you. This should be a pretty easy one. If you look at the regional reclaimed water rates there, Blanco way at the top, $7 per 1,000 gallons on reclaimed water, and 1.5 times that if you're outside of the city limits, so that'd be $10.50 if you're outside of the city limits. And if you just notice all of the other rates, we're considerably higher, and we are absolutely a community who wants to do everything we can to get rid of that reclaimed water. So it just doesn't make sense. So I would ask that you consider looking at the reclaimed water rates and consider possibly reducing Blanco's water rates so that they are either comparable with to or lower than the other entities you see above.
What is CCMA?
Something municipal authority. I had asked who's CCMA.
I don't know.
Just curious.
Central something municipal authority. Yeah, you did. And I got the answer and I forgot it again.
It's okay.
It does several municipalities, doesn't it?
By, Cibolo Creek.
Similar.
Maybe that is CC.
Yeah. I know it services several cities when I answered your question, but I just don't remember the name for the acronym.
Is there a motion?
I've got a couple of questions.
Okay.
Ms. Kinsler, we have no distribution center system at all in place for this at this point in time, is that correct?
Mayor, council, that's correct.
So any acquisition would either incur costs to us, well, not us, I guess the recipient, the buyer, to either transport or pipe this water.
Mayor, Councilor Smith, that's correct. Once we got the permit approved from TCDQ.
The comparative rates that you gave us, does this inclusive of a distribution system, or are they is the customer responsible for the transportation?
Mayor, Councilor Smith, that question was not asked. My apologies. That was per 1,000 gallons. That's the way that the email went out.
Okay. I mean, if it included fleet, the transportation,
And
then for us to be comparable, then we would have to take the transportation cost off. I know that we need to make a decision on this.
I know at least one of these entities' water is transported up. I don't know the other ones.
When you say it's transported, there, somebody's trucking it or?
Water trucks come in and take it out.
I move that we consider reducing to $1.50 per 1,000 gallons. I want to be the most, come on and get the water. Come on and get the water.
Mayor, Councilor Barron, is that for residents and also persons outside the city limits?
Yes,
Just
they
so
want to drive in and get it, I say drive in and get it. That's just my motion.
So Ronnie, can we get trucks back in there to get it? Right, so regardless, so we have one potential customer, I know we still have some conversations on that. But other than that, why would we even go lower than that? At this stage, we can change the rate if we ever got infrastructure or anything like that, but as of right now, I'm just thinking.
And I'm not gonna give you wrong.
25 minutes.
Reclaim rates. The council, you guys have approved the reclaimed water rate for citizens of Blanco inside or outside, whatever the case, at $10 per 1,000 gallons. That's where you were correct. So I didn't understand what you're talking about reclaim.
That's right.
So the current price right now that is set, if somebody did want to purchase this water, is $10 per 1,000 gallons. But you're correct, we don't have access to sell this water at this point. The only reusers that we are looking or currently discussing with utilizing this water would literally be pumping it out themselves.
But I also think it's a show of goodwill, and you want to get rid of the water for the person that can potentially pump the water.
And I guess the problem is, we need them more than they need us right now, and in time, there may be a time when it's worth more, where
Make it $1.
they need it, but,
Make it 75 cents.
I
We'll pay them.
agree, yeah. It's
No.
Oh, dear.
Not in the budget.
Where y'all comfortable at 75 cents? Is that too low? $1? What do you want? We know we need to get the price down because we're
I'd be
ridiculous.
25 cents. At this stage, because we don't have a customer, it's.
Well, that's per 1,000. You're at the decimal points.
Yeah. Basically giving it to them for free because at this stage, it's if we need them more than they need us. And this
As
is
long
something
as
we
you're
can change.
consistent. That's what
Right,
matters.
and we could change this at any time, and we get in a better position. But at this stage, I would love to just give it to them, but I know we can't give it to them.
So is that
What are the costs that involved in it? We need to cover our costs, whatever they are.
Is there a compensation?
So, Mayor, Councilor McClellan, you're already, I don't know the word for making reclaimed water, processing reclaimed water. So you already have it. And the problem, as you know, is many times we need to get rid of it. And so it's a great way to get rid of it by irrigating fields. So everybody here wants the same thing. We want to get rid of it so that we don't have issues like we had in the past. So, and earlier I told Ronnie, I thought it was $10 for residents. So I just want to make sure it is $10 for residents and 1.5 times that for outside city limits. Yes, you're looking at $10 and $15. That's very high compared to everybody else.
Okay, you got a motion.
Yes, Councilmember Barron has made a motion earlier for a $1.50.
Can I make a request? I'm not sure the parliamentary rules on this.
She can withdraw her motion.
Yes, I'll withdraw my motion.
Okay, Councilmember Barron has withdrawn her motion.
Okay,
Is there a motion?
I'm gonna make a motion that we revise our rate to 35 cents per thousand.
Okay, Councilmember Smith has proposed to amend the reclaimed water rates to 35 cents per gallon.
For that.
Per thousand gallons.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Barron has seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Can we make certain that it's for residents and non-residents?
For residents and non-residents. Anybody that's willing to transport it to their property.
Perfect.
Just want to add, you can set, and just so people don't start calling tomorrow, want to pick up reclaimed water. For us to sell anybody reclaimed water, we have to notify TCEQ of there being a user. So you're putting a monetary figure on it, but anybody getting this information, whether it be online.
Then I'll amend my motion.
Right.
An approved user.
Exactly, yes, sir.
Okay, so Councilmember Smith has amended his motion to include that it
The
Is-
TCEQ approved user.
Use it.
a TCEQ approved user.
And we need a second on the amendment.
And is there a second? Councilmember Barron has seconded. Any further discussion?
My only concern with going that low is that, when and if we raise it and we raise it to market, we're gonna hear a whole lot of screaming and hollering about how, the rates for the water went up, 10 times.
I would have that concern too.
So, since no water's going out, we're gonna pay anybody.
At this point, we've only got one viable user.
Yeah.
I mean, because there, logistically, nobody else can get to the water unless they get an easement, run a pipeline or build a road. So we're doing this in good faith for anyone. But, I mean, basically, this is for, hopefully, someone that will enter into an agreement to use the water. And I think that's a fair rate. At such a point in time down the road, if it needs to be adjusted. I guess when we sell more, we have more demand for water than we have available. At that point in time, we will do it.
Any more discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Item number 2, discussion and possible action on amendment to fee schedule ordinance 2020-0011, appendix A.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. So at one of the workshops, it was asked to look at the base water rates and to make, see what the cost would be, adding, the difference in cost would be in adding either 40% or 4% change. In some of the meetings that I have attended a couple of years ago, one of the things that they tried to tell the TCMA conference is that we have to get our citizens involved and interested in the cost of what it takes for a city to give them water and, of course, send wastewater. And so with that being said, one of the recommendations that the Texas Public Works Association has said is that we increase rates, cities in general across the United States, increase rates anywhere from 4 to 6%. That is every yearly. And we get the citizens involved in knowing that for the commodity of water, it costs a lot of money, and especially in getting rid of the water through, wastewater. So what I have in front of you is a recommendation going anywhere from 1% to 4% for your base amount. So you've got the base amount of 7 cents for 1%, 14 for 2%, 21 for 3%, and 28 for 4%. And that's for the residential. And so those are the differences that we'll have. And all that we'll do is we'll add to the base rate only. Any questions? So right now, their bill for water, the base rate would be $7. So proposed it would be $7.07 if you go with 1%. So it'll increase their monthly water bill by 7 cents. And so forth down the line. Commercial would be 30 cents, industrial would be 75 cents. Irrigation meters is 8 cents, multifamily is 7 cents, exempts are 7 cents, which are your churches and government facilities, and then your hydrant meters would be 7 cents.
And all those are based on 1,000 gallons.
Just on the base rate, correct. So minimal increase. And then, of course, goes up to 4%, which at the highest would be $3 for your industrial. 28 cents would be, so your bill being $7 right now base, it would go up to $7.28. So it'd be a 28 cents increase per household.
Per 1,000 gallons.
Per 1,000 gallon, right. Per month. And your budget that you have in front of you does not have this, so you just wanted to see what the cost would be, so that's what you have here is the current $7, what's in your budget, but it would be increased a little bit by 1%, of course, if you go with a 1% increase.
And you said that it's usually 4% every year?
They recommended 4 to 6% every year. Just for information purposes, it was interesting because they graded cities nationwide, and the grade for the infrastructure was a D-. And this was one of the reasons why, because the cities are having such major costs in infrastructure, repairing for broken lines that are old, old rusted pipelines instead of the new lines that they're installing now, and cities can't afford it, and Texas Water Development throughout the nation don't have enough money to fund for all the repairs. So that's why they made this recommendation of going anywhere from 4 to 6% every year, because it is a commodity. It is very expensive for your water, and you have to, you have to explain that to the citizens. It doesn't come free. Nothing comes free. Your quality, if you want quality merchandise, you pay for what you get. So, if you don't want to increase the fees and we have broken pipes, well, people are just going to have to live with the broken pipes.
So have you done the numbers, how much more revenue would be submitted?
Well, depending on what you
Right.
want. I know I have not, it's just this is just on the base amount.
Right, I mean, it's gonna be a bulk.
Okay. I do have a question. You've got, how does it affect Blanco residents? And you've got an outline of a 3,000 gallon use use rate and an 8,000 gallon residential use. And that would be more to the citizens versus the businesses in that aspect. I know we've got approximately 1,100 meters in town. What is the average residential consumption?
Average residential, I think is about 3,000, is that residential?
Yeah, no,
It's like 5,000, it depends, on, like for a family of four, it's 5,000 to 7,000.
5 to 7 usually.
So it'd be closer to, in the analysis, I guess it's gonna be your next slide, in the analysis, that it would be closer to the 8,000 than the 3,000.
But again, it's just the base rate is all that's going up, so it's, what goes up is the usage after that, the percentage, the base rate's all around.
It's just, yeah.
The rates per 1,000 gallons were not gonna change, so
Right.
it would be,
Well, it is,
No, that's what we're saying. That is what we're saying.
oh, your base rate per, I got it.
Yeah, per thousand.
okay,
It's just-
what she said, base rate,
Yeah, she's per,
that's the meat, what I call the meter.
the meters, yeah, that's what I do.
And then your water consumption rate is based currently at $7.
Right. So,
And then, so you're looking at,
I can do the math. Tell me
you know,
what you
thinking
think.
math. And I did a little math here, and basically, if we had 1,100 meters,
You're closer to 1,200.
well, that's another.
he did that math, his numbers.
Yeah, but it makes a difference to 10,000. If everybody used 8,000 gallons, and we went up 1%, then it make us, the city revenue go up about $10,000. I mean,
But I think you should estimate conservatively and use 5,000 just to be on the safe scale. Because when you have single family homes,
Correct.
that'll never make
single
sense.
person homes.
All right.
And I'm assuming it goes up since we have a tiered rate, so it's $7 for the base, and then when you go over those gallons, it's $8. Will that $8 also go up this 4%?
Just the base. We're proposing. the base.
So eventually this is gonna catch up and it defeats, you know, the purpose of why we had the scale is to make the people that use more pay more, and eventually they'll end up being the same.
Tier system.
Right.
So you don't have to take these recommendations. You can determine on a family that uses 8,000 gallons or more, do what you're talking about, they go higher, and then the lower users pay the lower increase. However you want to structure it, or if you want to structure it wrong.
And you're saying that the national, not the national average, but the recommendation is 6 to 8%?
4 to 6%.
4 to 6%. Unfortunately, I can't remember this. When was the last time we changed water?
Last year.
I don't know if we did, why we did sewer last year, I'm for sure we did the
It was in
base sewer.
2019.
I think we changed the meter schedule, right? That's what we did.
And we did the base sewer. We went up.
Yes. I want to ask something not quite on the water, but looking at the appendix A3, the garbage collection and disposal charges for residential service, the rate charged to the city by, we subcontract that out, and we're adding 40% to that. Where did that 40% number come from to add on to what we're being charged to haul our garbage up?
I did not pick the garbage.
I'm sorry?
I did not look at the garbage.
I'm just curious.
That was, when was, I don't even know what that was, the rest of the garbage issues. Do you know, Ronnie, when those fees were looked at?
40% seems high to me as an add-on.
I know there was other administrative costs and such that were figured in with doing the garbage as far as a pass-through. That came before council and there was a minor savings when it was all said and done on this. And this council decided to go ahead and hang on. I think it was 40%. So I'm sure there might be some other stuff in there that might be configured in, but you might remember that's where we were figuring all this time, all the supplies and phone calls and such from there, as far as the office where some of that money was still rendered back. But 40%, yeah, I'm not, I don't see what you're saying, but
40% seems high.
I'd like to clean up the record here just a little bit. The reason that we're allowed to speak about the solid waste fees are because the title of her presentation is fee schedule ordinance. She's only done water here, but I want to make sure that we're clear. We're fine talking about that. So put that on the record.
Yeah, I don't know, because looking at the water rate schedule, it shows 2% increase up, so I don't know if that's all the, I don't know, even when that was looked at prior to my time. But I can do that and bring it to the next meeting, let you know.
Okay.
This needs to be, I like work fields.
I just know that, there are people in our community that, the last jumps in our water rates have created a burden for them. And I'm just wondering if, if we're raising water rates again, and I understand that we need to do that because our water needs to be paid for still, but I'm wondering if we can offset some of that burden by lowering that 40% on the garbage so that people's overall bill maybe isn't impacted quite so much.
I mean, if you do that, you just wash it out. I mean, it doesn't effectively raise your income. If you don't raise your
But
income.
water's still paying for itself. It's 2%.
But you're taking away the income from the employees.
But why should trash be paying for water?
Because it's part of the enterprise fund, and we're trying to make the enterprise fund self-sufficient.
that's our last rate.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
This is showing a 2% increase.
2%.
I'm just reading what's in front of me.
This is what was,
So this is a typo?
this is an ordinance that was adopted in 2020, which may be because it says 2% increase plus tax. I know we don't generate much revenue, the city doesn't.
No.
We don't.
2% increase. So was it 38% before?
I don't know. So I'm gonna have to find out.
It's a fee schedule that Linda submitted as an attachment.
I got 2%. This is one that they adopted.
But that says 2% 21 cents.
Yeah, that, yeah, but the 2% on the base rate. And I don't know what rate it is.
I'm just reading what was handed to me. A rate charged to the city by the commercial provider plus 40%.
Yeah, I get that. I think
4%.
probably 4%. I don't think it's.
I have no doubt.
I think it's right. I think it's right.
I think it's right, I think it's 40%.
And it's either the 19 ordinance that we 20.
They were around 40%. That's gotta be a typo. I never went up 40%.
Yeah, I think it's a typo.
The only thing we went up that small percentage because they went up several years and we never caught up, so we might have went up 4% or something
Right,
to get us caught up, but
that makes
we
sense.
never did.
And I remember when it came to council, it was a matter of customers' bills could go down no more than like 30 cents because it would make it a complete pass-through. But we ended up deciding to hang on to that to pay for office services and stuff here. So
Right. I mean, a
Well,
small
we have-
percentage is
I'll definitely
reasonable, but
dig that out. And
I
figure
know
that
some
out.
of this. But then we kind of just focus on the plus 40%.
What page was that, Mr. Lane?
it is appendix A3, it says the bottom.
A3.
So Kelly, are we also, are there other things in this fee schedule besides the water? I mean, I know that's what Linda's talking about, but I know there's some crossed out.
Mayor, council, I think honestly, what I've just seen, I didn't do this one. This needs to be tabled and needs to be brought back to you next time. The staff is not prepared to discuss this
Can
with
we
you.
do the water tonight and then leave the other fees for us?
You sure can.
And I'd like to discuss the, on page A16, the city property, because that was brought up earlier in public comments.
No, I agree. I think that was a good point that she brought up on that.
Yes, the meter cost.
Well, one thing I would say, the fee schedule does not dictate what is or is not city property or who's paying for water meter replacements. What the fee schedule is just doing is we're broken meter lid fee is going up because our costs went up. Now, the reason we had brought this, I guess it was the guidelines what it ended up being, but the service agreement between the city and the customer. But now they come to you guys before as council, it was brought to my attention, like, hey, that needs to be rewritten and, we need to figure out a way to put that out to the customers to make it fair and such. That's not covered in this. This is merely just the cost of the meter boxes and the meter lids, only because our costs went up. So that's where the change of this coming in. You as a council, or what I'll do is come back when we do get to that, who fixes the meter lids and boxes and stuff. I'll write something up and present it to you as council. You can pass it as a policy where it is getting fair for everybody in the city.
And that'll address Ms. Moore's comments.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Fees for.
Right.
Only.
So, yes, the fee schedule changes that you're seeing are merely just the changes in costs. Not saying the customer has to pay for it, but if they did, this is what the cost would be because our costs went up.
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Thanks for clarifying.
Yes, ma'am.
Excuse me, Ronnie, so when you say these changes are, because our costs went on, item number 4 is after hours service charge is going up by 50%. So what costs went up?
The pay for our guys is the biggest one.
So y'all's raise is what went up.
Well, that's part of it, and then of course gas and wear and tear and everything from there. You're looking at, these were, I believe the original ordinance for the fee schedule was put in, I want to think it was 2017 or so. So, this is gonna be the first time that we're actually revisiting some of these fees to try to come up with, be more comparable to other cities with everything from there.
Okay.
But again, as in your seat, you question and do, or do we want to go down or what?
Well, I'm just trying to understand.
Sure.
And I think if I understand, I think what some of the concerns have been that, as you said, would be addressed in the service agreement, not so much in the fee schedule, is if a call goes out and the call is a city problem, the resident's not charged for that.
Right.
If a call goes out and Ronnie is the plumber and comes in the house because they don't know who else to call and it's the middle of the night and our city staff is coming in to help them deal with an issue that turns out to be on their property and their job to stop gap until they get a plumber, then they're paid for it.
Mhm.
So I think that's all in the service agreement of clarifying that when these charges would apply to a resident, as opposed to when those services are provided as part of city service.
Right.
And then we'd be clear on that.
Yeah, I always tell people to call us first because we're a heck of a lot cheaper than plumbers. Plumber would charge $120 just to show up. But that's what I mean, so we get there, we can shut your water off for you after hours, whatever. It's still a win-win either way.
And you don't have to even adopt the water rate today. If you want to just table the whole thing, you can do that too, because we can come back anytime and adjust the rates. That's not said that it has to be done in the budget. The budget doesn't have it in it. But if you council so desires to increase it, then we would make a budget amendment after it's been adopted in the new year. So that is not a problem at all. So no pressure to think that it has to be done today. Cities adopt different fees all the time.
We're not prepared for it.
Yes. So I couldn't tell, and I'm sorry, I don't know about the garbage trays, but I'm looking at that.
It may just be a typo.
I think it is, maybe it's the ordinance for 2020 says 2%.
See, if it's not, who's getting the other 38%?
Yeah, right.
So is there a motion?
I think we go ahead and make the increase, and I'm looking at 3%. That's what I would, that we do the 3% increase. It's not the max, but it's not the least.
Per 1,000 gallons.
Yes.
So Councilmember Barron has motioned to go with the 3% per 1,000 gallon increase for the water rate.
If Is that for inside and outside the city?
Oh, that's a good question. I think we're gonna have to visit rates for outside the city. So let's look at right now, let's just make it a one increase. And because I'm not prepared to look at differentiating between the two, but I can.
Municipal water, are you increasing them 3% as well, or just like?
Oh, anybody that buys water from us, yes, that's what I, yes, anybody that is a water customer from us, that is currently paying that base rate.
Whichever base rate they're on.
Yes.
Is there a second?
I'll say.
Councilmember Smith has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Moving on, item 3, discussion and possible action on amendment to the builder's risk flood insurance at the water treatment plant. Ms. Kinsler.
Good afternoon once again. Thank you. Ronnie, if you go to slide 2. So we have had agenda items spearheaded by Councilor Smith during the June and July meeting regarding the flood insurance for the water treatment plant. And the reason we thought it was important is because it was not included on the builder's risk policy. So first lesson that I'm hoping the city learned is when you're looking at a builder's risk policy, you want to make sure there's flood insurance as part of that. But there was not. And so we got estimates from 2 different insurance vendors to the tune of $100,000 for one, and I think $125,000 for the other, with a very high deductible. It seemed unreasonable to me, and so I started contacting my colleagues with the Texas Municipal League. We got in touch with the underwriter on behalf of the city of Blanco, and we would like to throw the option out there to provide city flood insurance on that project in the amount of $2,533 with a $1,000 deductible. Next slide. The fiscal impact is $2,533, and I absolutely recommend that the city council approve this expenditure.
Is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, to clarify, we had previously approved the change order to our contractor with Ms. Spencer's encouragement, and I also reviewed the pay applications at our exposure. You know, during the interim while we did this, we did not initiate that change order. At this point, her due diligence has paid $97,000 of her salary. So thank you very much. And I make a motion that we independently contract for the builder's risk to protect the city's interest during the construction of the water treatment plant.
Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the
$2,533.
$2,533 with $1,000 deductible for the flood insurance for the water.
For the
Risk
construction flood insurance.
for the construction flood insurance for the water treatment plant.
Yes.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Barron has seconded. Any further discussion?
Thank you.
All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 4, discussion and possible action on sending a nomination for the board of director members of the Blanco County Appraisal District. Ms. Kinsler.
Mayor, council, thank you. So this is timing up here. So the Bear County Appraisal District sent us the nominating forms that are in front of you. Each taxing entity is to submit names for the directorship. So we're trying to fill that for this year. And the names need to be submitted by the mayor by October 15th of 2021. Your next meeting is October 13th. The chief appraiser will tabulate all the votes and then they'll send out the results October the 30th. And the guaranteeing entity has as many votes as I've attached the sheets. You have like 200 and something votes. And as I pointed out, I think it was to Councilor Barron, your votes get destroyed because each of the ISD has like 1,800 votes, if you notice on there. But you know, it's what the law says. It's what the chief appraiser is asking for, is that you submit a name for nomination consideration to serve on this membership committee. So if you have one this evening, I'm sure Mayor Lumpy would be happy to submit it on the council's behalf. If you'd like to wait until October the 13th and put this on the agenda again, we can do that as well.
Don't take that long to find somebody.
To nominate somebody I haven't asked.
And one of you could be on it. All you need is one committee, right? Maybe some audience would generously volunteer.
I'll suggest maybe this,
Okay, Councilmember Smith has motioned to table this item. Is there a second? Councilmember Barron has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries. This item is tabled until next meeting.
Great, I hope y'all have some names next time.
We are going to move on to item 6, presentation, discussion, and possible action on a land use agreement between the city of Blanco and Good Samaritan of Blanco.
Mayor, council, thank you. I was approached by Mr. Rican regarding the Good Samaritan. What an impressive operation. Wow, it's a small town. That is really neat. Good Samaritan's a neat place. So I got to do the tour, and Mr. Rican wanted to show me, in fact, if you go to the picture, I think it's next. That's the easiest for me. So that's the view, Councilor Barron, thank you for taking this. That's the view of the parking lot. Right in back of the parking lot from Good Samaritan is what is on the map as 5th Street. It's, you know, just grass. And then,
Just one more, I'm sorry.
that's okay. And then the other side, just to kind of acclimate you where you are, you can see the cemetery, you can see the headstones over there. And so what Good Samaritan is proposing to do is they want to utilize the grass where 5th Street is. They would like to put impervious cover on it. And so that they can expand their operations into, you know, further into that dirt parking lot that you see right there. I actually had Brad draw up an agreement, our attorney draw up an agreement. He put in a 1-year lease agreement, and Mr. Rican, I certainly understand his concerns, had concerns about the work that they would be doing on the impervious cover, and then what if, you know, the city came in after 1 year and said they don't want to do it any longer. So he's asked for a 5-year lease, which I think is just fine.
Kelly, I want to clarify, it's not going to be impervious cover. It will be crushed granite or something, so there won't be flooding issues or so that.
I said impervious cover. My apologies. Sorry. And I think that the agreement is in there. It's a bunch of legal jargon.
For the agreement, I just noticed that at the top, it says the lease is between the city of Blanco and the city of Blanco. So I just want to make sure that we put Good Samaritans in there and not just have ourselves.
We will definitely do that. Oh, this is just, I see, this is your sample. Yeah, I see. Yeah. This is what your sample will look like. I'll put the description in there. I think I filled in the other blanks other than those. They have $1 a year. You have to pay in advance. Right.
What happened to y'all out?
That's right, exactly. That's right.
One other question. So on 12.1, it says Leasing may not make alterations, improvements, or other modifications of any kind to lease premises without the lessor's written consent. And then several sentences down, it says the work will only be done by the lessor's contractors, employee, or employees, or by third-party approved by the lessor. Right? My question, or Good Samaritan's question is who grants that consent, vote for approving in this, everything is clear, whether base and president. In fact, we may use volunteers, so we probably just purchase materials. What kind of approval process is that?
I was going to leave sign that to our city administrator.
Exactly.
Okay.
You just decided.
All right, thank you.
And that was one of your email questions, I remember saying.
And one last thing, there was a public comment at the start of the meeting about wills and fees. So this Good Samaritan is supportive of that effort. And in fact, that area would be better utilized for non-vehicular traffic after the improvement, because after rain, it's not usable by anybody for whatever period of time.
So can I ask, are we just talking about the area that aligns with the back property line?
This area right back here before Fifth Street runs right back.
Right, I understand what Fifth Street goes all the way here, right?
Just the portion that's behind the Good Samaritan. Just that little piece of Fifth Street.
Here's Sixth Street.
There's Fifth Street. Where's the cemetery?
Cemetery over here, I think, yes, right here.
Okay, so here's Fifth Street right there.
Yeah.
So it's just this piece.
So that's.
Yes.
Lines up
Well,
with
that, that street's also known as B Street for anybody else. I don't know.
Yeah, that's what Chris said.
Okay.
It's not really a street, people can walk on it now, which they'd be able to continue.
Right. Chris's concern is just that we don't, that we have that available when Wheels and Feet start getting their things together, that it also be available. And that's a little bit concerning about 5 years. I don't know what timeline they're looking at for when they might have walking trails or something.
Well, my thought is they won't need the whole thing if Good Sam leaves a trail length between the property line and where they allow them to park, whether they put a little chain up or
Yeah.
some boulders up or something. I think they'd be willing to give them a parking spot to let people continue to walk through there, which could be done, and then that could.
Yeah, my wife's on the board, and I talked to Keith Hudson before coming over here, and they're, like I said, they're supportive of that whole effort. So non-vehicular traffic and very pathways, it's not a problem. And Pat would argue that right now we couldn't do it
Right.
after.
Yeah,
rain,
it's-
so they would do it. One other thing I mentioned, when EMS had that property, it was used unofficially. There was a verbal agreement with the past mayor, and she just used it, don't worry about it. And so they used it for parking and other things. And then when the fire department started co-locating with EMS, while the new fire station's under construction, they had a hose drying rack out there. So telephone poles, big telephone poles and big hose drying rack right out in the middle of that, which Good Samaritan removed. It's actually on your property. So the land's clear. And people have been using it for parking for that building for a very long time.
Right.
But unofficially, we'd like to do it the right way and also like to improve it so that it's an all-weather parking area. It won't be paid.
So my biggest concern is the can of worms we're gonna open here, because there's a lot of these properties that they're gonna find out, hey, can I get at least $30? I mean, nothing against Good Samaritan, I'm supportive and all that, but I just know there's gonna be property owners that have that land that they have, just make my driveway bigger now for $1 a year, and how are we gonna tell them no if we tell, the Good Samaritans yes, so.
So Mayor, Councilor, so I'll say that the answer to that is, this is a private nonprofit. There's a huge difference in a private property owner and a nonprofit. So I think the real question is, how many nonprofits do you have that abut city streets? That's the apple to apple question.
Is
When
there,
you place it as a city street, it's a right of way of work. I mean, it's not a vehicular travel area, and it's not capable of that in its current condition.
Mayor, Councilor Smith, you're not capable of driving down. I guess if you have it four-wheel drive, 8% might go through.
You have no access.
It's just a grassy area.
And it's fairly tall when we were there, and it's fairly tall when we were there. And it was wet too. I remember, yeah. So I remember thinking you couldn't drive through there, but it wasn't really wet.
There's a tree and a guy line, to a power line that they're in the right of way. So where to be used as a road, there's a lot of, besides the obvious dirt work that have to be done.
Right.
You have to move the tree and,
I think we had our lesson on what makes a street last time. Chief, about what makes a street. This does not make a street, even the map says.
The street is also in close proximity to a pretty problematic intersection, the intersection of 165 and 163. And it doesn't line up. It's offset by about 50, it'd be a horrible intersection.
No, I don't think we want to make. But I think it is good to keep in mind what Chris's concern was, that, it may end up being a walking trail or some other use that we want to be sure we preserve that for future use if we need it.
it sounds like the Good Samaritan, they're on board with the
That's,
Absolutely.
wheels and feet.
I think it's such one time that they're ready for that. I feel from the people that I know that work with the Good Samaritan, that an
Yeah.
equitable solution can be reached pretty easily.
yeah, I believe so.
Is there a motion?
I move we enter into a land use agreement to lease a portion of the city property, I'm not sure how it's defined here, of B Street, currently unused, to Good Samaritan in the amount of $1 per year for a term not to exceed 5 years. And any improvements that are to be made to that property can be overseen and approved by our city administrators.
And thinking ahead, would you like to do 5 years with a 5-year extension with approval of the council?
Sure.
Council 5 years, or that maybe?
5 years with the option to renew with approval.
Councilmember Barron has moved to approve the land use agreement between the city of Blanco and Good Samaritan of Blanco. In the amount for 5 years. The amount of $1 per year. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Smith has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 7, presentation, discussion, and possible action on the American Rescue Plan funds.
The money.
So you tell Mr. Regan the city hall's open, you can go pay now?
That's right. We need Mr. Reed's dollar.
Got 8 minutes.
Okay, American Rescue Act funds, I applied for them on August the 2nd. Funds were deposited into the city's account on August the 27th. And I gave you some guidelines right there, taken straight out of the Federal Register, because your dear mayor, I think there was like 40 pages, single space, like 6 or 7 font, could hardly see it. With my old eyes and her young eyes, she took on the duty of figuring out where you could pay for roads. And I just cut that little space out that she found and put it on there for you. I don't know if you want to use it all for roads, and you don't even have to decide today if you don't want to. But I told several of you that I would get the answer, and with the mayor's eyes, we found the answer. And that is the answer right now. You can use it for roads. I have gone to both the state and the federal government, ensuring that we did not need prior permission The answer is follow the guidelines and turn in your receipts. So, and the good news about the American Rescue Act plan is that since we submitted our application timely, next year you will get, maybe not two, it was just over $500,000. So you get $250-something thousand next year as well. Yes.
Which, I do have, we all had in one of the workshops, you do have a budget for COVID. It is a grant fund account that I set up for budget. I do not have anything there because when I printed it, I did not know that the money was actually in our hands. I will put that in the budget as received for this year. But if you want to spend those funds, then we need to make some kind of budget for that, and I'll need direction as to how, because that has got to be included in our budget before it's adopted. So, because that is a grant proceeds, and that is something I have to add. So if you give me direction right now to spend all of it next year, or part of it next year, just let me know what you want, I'll put it in, and then when you all do adopt budget, it will be there.
So, for the record, so we recorded, what Linda is saying is she set up a different fund for it, which you have to. And so it'll be accounted for separately. If you know what you want to do with this $256,000 today, obviously you could make a motion. If you would like staff to do some type of research into various projects, we can do that. We can bring it up at the next meeting and start all over again. She has set aside an account, and we have verified in your packet that the funds were deposited. You have the deposit right there in the packet.
So I'm sorry, when do we have to make a decision?
Whenever you want.
Okay,
Mayor, Council.
We can approve the budget and then make a decision post approving the budget.
Mayor, Councilor Smith, yes, one is not contingent on the other whatsoever. But it was good news, and I felt like you needed to know about it and start thinking about it. And the reason I wanted this to come before the budget is because there may be areas in the budget that you wish we could fund, but we didn't, that your mind may come back to this. So just want you to know you have that money there. I wish I could do a presentation because I believe we're about to get you more money on leftover funds from the wastewater treatment plant, and I'm trying. And so, anyway, I'm hoping that next time I have good news for you on that.
I would like to ask one thing, if I could, between now and the time we make decisions about how to spend this money. I personally would like to see us be using some of this for roads, but I don't want to use it for roads until we see a clear plan of which roads, why those roads, are there water lines that are due to pop any moment that we were first to take a portion of this to do water lines. I would like to see a really full report. And I know with staff on tight timelines, again, Mr. Regan is willing to put together spreadsheet software, take the reports you have, Ronnie, and put it there. But I don't want to see happen what I know has happened in the past where we paved the street and 3 months later there was a line break and the pavement was ripped up and we threw the money right down to trash. So before we decide, do this with the money, I'd really like to see what's the urgency in a water line or sewer line break replacement. And if it's under those streets, then let's go fix some other streets. But I'd like to see a plan of how it ought to be spent based on historical public works data on what we know about our streets and what's in them.
So Mayor, Councilor Barron, I agree with you, Councilor Barron. What I would commit to do is calling Mr. Regan tomorrow and get him scheduled to go over Public Works, because I'll tell you right now that Public Works has so much on their plate. They're behind literally even getting the bills processed. So we're sending the fiscal person over there. So Mr. Regan volunteering to do that versus having to have one of these guys do it. I know Mr. Ronnie's the blessing. So we're going to treat it as such, and I will call him tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have Ronnie with me and we'll.
Because we could be used for environmental remediation, could it not be used to expand our collection ponds at the water treatment plant?
It could.
Mayor, Councilor Barron, absolutely it could. I mean, Councilor Barron, Councilor McClellan. Absolutely.
Can I just say
I will tell you, Chair, on the speaker, would you please read it for the record? Thank you.
So if you don't have any recommendations, because we have to pass the budget, your budget will include COVID, you just won't have any expenditures. You will show the revenue as this year in the budget, but you won't have anything for expenditures. So in the new budget year, then if you do decide that council wants to do something for whatever it is, we will have to do a budget amendment. So just for the record.
Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I move we wait to decide, to make a determination on how we're going to utilize those funds until we get a good report or a thorough report with Public Works assistance on priorities of what might really be urgent to do. And then we can make our decisions for moving ahead.
So Councilmember Barron has moved to wait on finalizing what the money is going to go towards until we have the reports from Public Works. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Smith has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you, Mayor. Very responsible thing to do.
Moving on to item 8, discussion and possible action on the approval of ordinance 2021-0007 of the city of Blanco, Texas, setting and approving the municipal budget for the 2021-2022 fiscal year, funding municipal purposes, authorizing expenditures, providing for findings of fact, enactment, filing of the budget, repealer, severability, effective date, and proper notice in meeting.
Okay, I don't have it in my packet, so I can just go forward.
It's these three.
Right, exactly, but I did a separate PowerPoint for the council. Yeah, I didn't give it to myself. It's okay.
You need it? No, I don't. It's pretty sample, remember, yeah. Then I can go with you.
Thank you. So I don't think we really need to go over the introduction again. We've gone over what chapter 102 of the local government code requires, and we're doing it. Tax rate, 2021 to 2022. What you see there is the adopted tax rate last year, which is 0.3503. We'll need to fill in this blank tonight. We need to know what you want the proposed tax rate to be for 2021. You decide on that. I wanted to show you below that the assessed values are 219. We are calculating a collection rate of 97%. Therefore, we're looking at about $212 million in value. If we were to use the effective tax rate, the the Blanco County Assessor's Office has calculated that at 0.3127. 0.3127 is also called the NNR, or the no new revenue tax rate. So what the tax assessor does is they calculate how much, what would the rate take to give you the exact same amount that you got last year? And that's the 0.3127. The voter approved tax rate, or what you probably heard as the rollback tax rate, is 0.3728. Now, I will have you know, the Blanco County Assessor's Office had, they wanted to know what we thought might be adopted. So I had them published a 0.3728. I don't think that will be adopted, I don't know, but I went ahead and gave the highest number so that when we actually give our number, I didn't want to set you up to fail. So whatever number you pick is fine as long as it's below the 372. Next page. That's, I can't even read that. Here. Yeah, it is. The top rate is in an R no to revenue. Middle rate is what you adopted last year, and the rollback is the third one. And then the other columns right there show you how much revenue would be generated from each of them. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so if we dissect the general fund revenues, we are basing revenues right now on last year's tax rate. So that would be the 0.3503. It would bring in taxes of, not of $1.6 million, but all taxes combined. That's what would get brought in. You see the revenue estimate for fines and fees, for permits, for court, other, and transfers in. The enterprise fund, neither one of us think sewer is a good number, but it's all we can give you right now. And then miscellaneous revenue, septage, receiving meter fees, tap fees, just over $1 million. So we're looking at projected revenues for FY22, which is October 1, 2021 to September 30th, 2022, of 2.765 in the general fund, 2.479 in the enterprise fund. Next slide. If we look at the FY21 adopted rate, in the general fund, those would be your expenditures. 1.241 million in personnel, M&O, 854, and look at that INS on your general fund side. That counts or divine is what you brought up a little earlier, and you're 100% right. The other side we have got to transition and move so that the enterprise side is able to fund itself, because you are taking $410,000 out of the general fund to fund something that the general fund doesn't really have to fund. You should be able to pay for it from the other side. So that's what you adopted in 21. What we are proposing for 2022 is 1.466 million, M&O of just less than 800,000. Transfers to debt and community aid, so that would include your INS plus funding every presentation that you heard today, or the list that I'll show you in a little bit. So that would give you a proposed budget in FY 2022 of $2.763 million. Next. In the enterprise fund, you see what was adopted last year in personnel. There's the new adoption. M&O last year, 975, 1.1 million this year. INS higher this year, 238, no, just a little bit lower, 238,000. It's higher on the general fund side. Transfers to general fund for 445,205, leaving total expenditures in the enterprise funds at 2.479 million. So the first little asterisk up there is the INS, that's your debt service that's charged right now to the utility fund. And then the M&O up there, you see the two little asterisks, 200,000 of that is for Canyon Lake water. For us purchasing Canyon Lake water this year. Okay, next slide. There's your city of Blanco partners. You don't put that in your general fund, you put that in other funds. So it's a complete separate fund. Court security, you don't have a choice on. That's a restricted fund. There's only one thing you can use it for. Hot funds, you can absolutely be flexible with hot funds if you want. The way to always remember how you want to spend hot funds, are they putting heads in beds? That's the bottom line. Blanco County Library is asking for the same amount, no increase. Historic preservation is asking for 11,500 increase. Recycling center has never been budgeted, or at least it wasn't last year. I don't know about never. 5,000 this year. Carts was not budgeted last year. They're asking for 2,000 this year. Children's Advocacy Center, not budgeted last year. They're asking for 2,000 this year. KBB, they got 2,000 last year, and they're asking for the exact same amount, with the exception of their streetscape requests, which is an offshoot of the, streetscape is a request of the historic preservation, sorry. Anyway, it's by itself down there to fund what Ms. Martin talked to you about briefly earlier. And that's $7,000 that you did not fund last year. So the total of all of your partners comes in at about $48,000. And this year, what we will be doing in order to make this legal and to ensure that there's no issues with our audit is every partner will have a contract with the city of Blanco, and they will let you know what the deliverables are. So a library is an easy one. In exchange for the $15,000, the library will service, forgot what the number was, 250 residents of the city of Blanco. And so you understand what you're getting for your money that way. They'll be short and sweet, but they will be small contracts or agreements with each of those entities.
Could hot funds be used for Keep Blanco Beautiful?
You bet they could.
Streetscape?
Mayor, Councilor McClellan, yes, they could.
I'm wondering if we're sure they qualify, can we leave them out of our general fund budget from coming into the hot fund?
Mayor, Councilor Barron, I actually want to kind of think a little bit about streetscape. I'm going to go back. We got the proposal at like 2:00, 2 something this afternoon. It's fresh off the press, so I'd like to read it one more time before I commit. Can you fund KBB with that? Absolutely.
And I would think the historic preservation as well, since that's actually a category under hot funds, is historic preservation. So
Mayor, Councilor Barron, I agree with historic preservation.
Well, you have to remember too, the streetscape is a historic district too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's one thing for tourism, is a historic district.
So for the record, Ms. Martin said that the streetscape is a historic district.
The reason it's under KBB is that KBB is the reason it's under KBB is that KBB did the fundraising. We have a management by agreement. This was done by our city attorney, Eddie Rogers, and his law firm. And during the times we were having our meetings, he said we need to management by agreement and have Keep Blanco Beautiful as the MOA who is managing the money coming in, because we were 501c3. So anybody giving donations, it was a tax exempt donation. Then the city would come in as they needed money and bill us for it, or I think that's the way they did it. Back then, but that's why it's under Keep Blanco Beautiful in the first place, is because we have an account set up with the agreement with the city that we are going to be the fundraiser. And we do the fundraising, but the the streetscape committee does the fundraising mainly, but we are too, with Keep Blanco Beautiful, that's 501c3. Anything comes to that, it goes into that one account, not into the.
If I look at hot funds and I'm looking under here, what I don't know, but since we have an MOU or a contract with the chamber to administer these funds, and I don't know how much, I know we withhold some, so what I'm trying to understand is how much of this money do we have control of that we feel like we can budget under hot, that it hasn't already been spent or given through contract to be used by our contractor administrator?
Mayor and Council Member Barron, the answer is the city kept 8,000 and gave the Chamber of Commerce 72,000. And the answer to the second part of your question is it's a new budget year. You can do whatever you want to do.
Okay, so we could pull out enough out of our hot under here and allow for those expenditures through hot, and then the remainder would go for other things.
And that 8,000 was just what we held back the past year, so I know we've held 10% for years, so and that money's never been spent, so it should be nest egg somewhere.
I don't know. Mayor, councilors, I'll say that, I don't know. if the-
So with the hot tax, basically you're supposed to give them, we're supposed to retain 10% according to the contract. So it depends on the revenue, depending what's here at the beginning of the year. They, right now, I did look at the revenues, and if you look at your hot tax, it was 106,428 as of August. So July, end of July, August. So really estimating their budget should be, if we go with this $100,000, we would keep $10,000 of that. So really it's based on, like I said, collections, and that's something too that we need to look at and find out, because we have a lot of issues with hot tax in terms of not getting information from the payers. And that needs to be looked at and audited. So that and franchise fees, both of those, I want you to know that both of those things we have to look at. And then also even sales tax, because we could have a lot of bed and breakfasts that do not abide by the sales tax, and because it's, they just don't do it. And we need to look at that as well too, but it's just time to be able to go through all the reports that you have to go through to get that information. So for right now, I've got in the budget 100,000 because of the fact that we collected already 106. So that 72 is what we paid. That's a correct number, but we have to pay everything with the exception of 10% which we'll collect.
Thank you.
And then the other thing too, I wanted to tell you this whole quick also, with the getting back to the community aid one for the Blanco historic preservation, she mentioned when she was talking to the young lady
3,500.
that, she said 3,500 is, and that is true what they got last time, but they did request 15,000. So she just said here that 3,500 is a number. So you can go ahead and adjust that too. So that would have to be adjusted if you want to give them the 15,000, which is what they physically requested, or if you want to give them the 3,500, which is what she said they were okay with. So that's the only thing we need to add.
And is this a good time to talk about the recycling center also?
Perfect time, Mayor, councilors, it's been perfect.
In my opinion, we've had these discussions before, is why did we make the citizens of Blanco pay twice, basically? They're county residents and they're paying, so there's nothing different about them that would require us.
So we're simply not advocating, we're simply bringing the requests forward, and you as the board get to decide.
I thought that we would get rid of that.
That's double taxation for me. I feel like we're asking them to pay twice. I will tell you, I talked to a representative from Parks, and he could not give me numbers or stats on how many rides he does for Blanco residents. I asked him if he would come or provide that information. He said he would. I never got it. I don't know if y'all got any of it. They are a federal funded entity, so they are federally funded and state funded and county funded, and they're also going to city. So looking at, I just don't have any way of knowing or gauging how valuable that service is, and it is already pretty much fully tax funded and supported by, again, tax dollars our citizens are already paying. I have a hard time personally doing more, and if y'all feel differently, tell me about it.
And Mayor, council, I don't know if this, but one of the things they talk about transporting, some of the transports for medical appointments, right, that kind of stuff. So I had the honor this year of being the chairperson for the American Cancer Society Gala for the city of San Antonio. And we absolutely put money in that budget to come up here and pick up cancer patients to go and get chemo and, their appointments in the San Antonio area. And Austin does the same thing. So I know there's other modes of transportation. I just don't know. I just happen to know this.
I feel, just to go down the list, I don't have any, I feel like we're good on the library, and I know there was some question about audits for community funds and that sort of thing, and tying it to your master plan. And so I did, just to be clear on the library, because it's the biggest, although they did have prior MOUs with us for years, with the city for years. But right under our master plan, it suggested that we build a community center, which ain't happening anytime soon. But what ends up happening is the library, in essence, is filling that, because it says to be successful, the center should provide facilities. The center can be used by elderly residents. It should provide for the youth after school places, which it does. It should provide some childcare amenities availability, which the library does for after school care. So I feel like we can tie the services the library provides directly to the recommendations for a community center that we're in the comprehensive master plan, that we just don't have money to build a community center. So the library is certainly filling many of those needs for us. So I think we can tie that from an audit perspective pretty clear. And the Children's Advocacy Center, again, I think that's an MOU because they actually do provide a service to law enforcement to do the forensic interviews and case reports. So if that's true, again, we've got MOU for actual services that need to be provided to the city provided service. The Children's Advocacy Center, yeah, they provide situation or if there's
Abuse and neglect cases.
abuse and neglect cases. They do the forensic interview with children and give reports for their cases. So I think we actually have a MOU with them.
You don't have any help, other reports they do a year or anything like that.
The chief had those numbers, but Jerry, do you have those numbers? Yeah, he does. Where's the chief?
Chief said.
Is that a meeting?
I believe the numbers we had for last year were, they did 12 forensic interviews. They did, for just the city, they did 8 in the county, and they did 141 therapy sessions for the city.
And those are going up, I understand.
Yes, ma'am. Every year they're slowly increasing.
Yeah.
Oh, they also did 738 student education training seminars in one.
Can I say something, Kelly?
Well, we're not in a, workshop, otherwise I would say, yeah, that's fine. Since we're not in a workshop and we're just finalizing things.
Right, it's about this, about this.
So as we go along through these slides, it's going to make the final motion easier if you want to approve the budget tonight. So let me know what you want to do so we can help with constructing the motion at the end. Unless you just want to come back to this.
No, I think we kicked this can down the road.
Yes.
And we kicked it down the road and we started talking. So personally, I think we need to, I have a goal that we can make some decisions tonight. We got enough information at this point that I'm not
Yes.
hesitant to go, to not be able to go forward. I guess some general discussion and I'll start making a motion. And what you're looking for is to approve the City of Blanco partners. And do you need a designation whether or not it comes out of hot fund?
Absolutely. If you're going to do more than just a chamber out of hot funds, then I need to know what fund, what else you want to fund out of hot funds. And if you want to reduce the amount, such as the,
Okay, and the available funds we're anticipating in the hot funds for the city are total.
in your budget, you have $100,000, but realistically, you're gonna have more than that because.
Well, but so we have an obligation to pay the chambers 90%. Is that not correct?
You don't have an obligation, you have a, not by law.
Can we direct the chamber to administer these things to where we say?
So you actually have a contract with the chamber that this year you can do the same or a different contract. That's up to you. It has to renew because you have a new budget.
So we'll
so
renegotiate that.
That's up to you. Exactly, but sure, you can have the chamber do that. If you want them to write the checks out of hot funds, we can certainly do that.
And
I
that's
just-
the recommendation by the auditors too. That was recommendation by the auditors, that a lot of this come out of hot funds.
Yes. I think everything that can come out of hot funds should.
I would look at, just to summarize, and they'll jump on me or yell or whatever, the Blanco County Library, we entered an MOU with them out of our general fund community partners, or however that comes out of that. That the Blanco Historic Preservation, we look at hot funds, and I think that amount is large. I think the 3,500 is more reasonable for right now. The Blanco County Recycling Center, I am not in favor of funding. If somebody wants to fund it, shout up and let's discuss why. The carts, I am neutral, shout out, but I just don't know what they do for us because I don't know if they drive one person a month or two, and I know the county just funded them. I do know Johnson City just funded them, so they're going everywhere. But let's,
When we had the nursing home here, they were providing services.
right, for the nursing
Those
home.
people, but they're not here.
We can come back to parks at another time.
Yeah,
for a
let's-
different fund.
Let's table that one, or just not necessarily funded. Children's Advocacy Center, I support funding through our MOU to serve our police officers for their, what they need, but keep Blanco beautiful, yes, through, hot funds. And then streetscape, again, hot funds.
I would suggest on the historic preservation number that we go a little more than the minimum, which was 35, and less than the 15, and maybe fund 5,000 for them. You know, I don't know what all the 15 is covering, but I would suggest something in the middle.
Since you asked for 35, right?
She did.
I don't even think they spent the whole 3,500 last year.
That's why she changed the
Um,
3,500.
I misunderstood.
She didn't send anything in writing, she just said it.
And the reason they asked for the 15,000 was for potential grants coming in for matching
I
funds.
think it was also, they wanted the code enforcement officer, remember that was in the letter as well, that we got.
Yes, true. Okay, so how would that work? Part-time code enforcement officer would come out of,
I think.
They wanted us to,
Historic preservation
That's
officer.
exactly right.
Yeah.
To enforce, yes, there was an HPO officer, like, somebody on staff.
Does that sound right? Are y'all in agreement with that if I turn that into a motion with the 5,000 adjustment?
We know we're going back up to 5,000.
Are you at 35? No, back down 35, okay.
Okay. May I rehash
Do
this?
we need to get input from the chamber on this, or I don't know. And we approved their budget, or we don't know about.
Mayor, Council McClellan, if you're gonna approve their budget and then ask them to write 2 other checks that you're increasing their budget by, I don't see what you would need to do, except I could write a little paragraph in there that said, you'll write these 2 checks for us. That's it. So this is my understanding, because this is the time where we can't get this wrong. You want to fund the chamber out of hot funds in their entirety, $72,000. Court security, it's restricted. The library, you want to take out of the general funds, $15,000. Historic preservation,
the library, you're not gonna take out general fund, you're gonna take out the break. Yeah.
You know,
Library the library is gonna be under
Community aid,
but
community aid.
not general fund.
You're correct.
Okay, so the library is gonna be community aid. Okay, streetscapes was hot funds.
Okay, let me go down, please. Blanco Historic Preservation is 3,500 out of hot funds. Recycling Center, you've zeroed out. Carts, you're tabling. Children's Advocacy Center, with the MOU, you want to fund them the $2,000 out of community aid. Keep Blanco Beautiful, you want to fund it $2,000 out of hot funds. Streetscape, funded $7,000 out of hot funds.
So that's a total of 12,500.
I have to get my average. Your phone served is everything.
So you're only gonna have two under community aid. You're gonna have
That's correct.
district, and so that's $17,000 out of community aid. And then out of hot funds, you're gonna have, 10,500. And you're gonna have 12,500 out of hot funds.
Okay.
That will be for streetscapes, Blanco Historic Preservation, and Keep Blanco Beautiful.
What's the other one out of community aid, the library of what?
For the library and.
Children's Advocacy.
Children's Advocacy Center. So it's 17,000 out of community aid.
And the court security is in the.
That's restricted funds.
Restricted funds, so that's
That's a
separate.
separate fund, and hot funds is a separate fund. So you've got three different funds.
So in hot funds, I have a total of $81,000. You're not, you agree with that, Linda?
Well, we have to give them 10%, I mean, 100 of what we give them, so I'm thinking.
Okay, so what I'm saying is the expenses for our partners, I
Right,
have is $81,000, 72,000 for the chamber,
right,
2,000 for KBB,
right.
and 7,000 for streetscape.
Right.
So 81,000 in hot funds. 17,000 out of community aid, and you are striking the recycling center and reducing historic preservation to 3,500, which is what they
And
requested
taking
today.
car.
And carts is gonna be nothing, because we've got it off this, so it's gonna be, we haven't put that back in the budget.
I don't have enough information to be.
Right. That's what I would say.
So we're tabling it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
That's right.
But for the budget, it will not be in there, it will be adopting it without it.
So that means 17,000 community aid, 81,000 hot funds, tabling carts, zeroing out recycling center. And that's it. Good. All right. One of our budget is done. Blanco Water Department, I don't want to belabor this. Every time you submit a budget, you should always have your department mission, the goals. You should hold departments feet to the fire and making certain that they accomplish those goals. Citizens deserve to know what they're getting for their money. Next page is the wastewater goals. We've already gone through all of this. What we're really here for tonight is the meat, which is the next page. The meat and potatoes of the presentation. We start with the water sewer expenditures. So you see how much there we're spending in personnel, $640,000. That does include the 2% cost of living, and it shows you everything else that it is going to include. M&O, that's spelled out for you there. I'm not used to a budget like this. I'm used to travel, training, supplies, internal, and so I'm hoping we can get to that, but with your system right now, we're just not there. INS out of water and sewer of 238,000. Transfers from the general fund, 445,205, for a total in expenditures of $2.479 million. You go to the next slide, debt service cost to the enterprise fund, INS 238.6, and those are for the two bonds that I mentioned up there. The 2017 B bond and the 2019 bond. Next slide. I just created your mission and your goals, so we can either work on them together next year. Next page. Next page, please. City council expenditures, 10,000 for your huge salaries to serve this community. 0 in contractual, maintenance and operation, 20,774. Had a heck of a time getting those lined up, as you can see, $30,700 for city council expenditures.
They highlighted for you. So what would be contractual professional services?
You don't need to take them out of city. Your auditors would be a great example. Attorneys, engineers, we just have other budget that's not yours. Yes. Next page, driver, we got vision and goals of the admin side. Next page. Administrative expenditures are spelled out there for you. There's personnel, description and the amount. Your contractual services is next. So we pay attorneys, I think we pay line barter. We pay,
Attorney fees and we did take out the engineering fees that was mentioned at the last workshop we had, and they are now in the public works budget. So there's no engineering fees in here anymore.
M&O, there it is. And you see what the total is. And you see the transfers to the debt. Next slide, municipal court, there's your goals. Municipal court budget looks like this. There's your expenditures for the court clerk. That includes salary, benefits, and the cost of living increase, the professional services, the judge and prosecutor, reporters, maintenance and operation, their share of the data processing and office supplies and some education so that your court clerk can keep up their certifications, and your total muni court budget is $217. Next slide, Blanco Police Department. Next slide, I'll talk about the numbers. Almost $900,000 in personnel. Contract, we have a contract for dispatch, property liability insurance, training and education, maintenance and operations, $213,300 for the police department, $1.180 million for the police department.
I saw
And the only thing that does different from last year is it upgrades the sergeant position to a lieutenant position. And
Were those new positions that when I saw somewhere that said something about 3 new positions. So that's. Okay, thank you.
so that does not have any new positions, but it does, and I definitely would recommend the upgrade, number one, because of what he's responsible for, but number two, it actually serves the city well with FLSA, because we don't have to pay him overtime. Sorry, Jerry.
Congratulations.
Okay, next page, streets, there's your goals. And next page, there's your budget, pays for, what is it, 1 1/4 or 3/4? 1 1/4, I think, right? 1 1/4 FTEs in there.
The quarter's long.
Yeah, 1/4 of it is salary. We're splitting it, yeah, we are splitting you up. Contractual is 11.7. Survey, engineering, M&O 70,500, and you see what it's for down there. We went ahead and left the material for the roads in there. It's such a minimal amount, I didn't know what you were gonna do with the $250,000 that I talked to you about earlier, but we just left it. So 167 on streets. Next slide is parks. You go to the parks budget, you see 1 1/4 positions, personnel, you see consultant contractual. You're always gonna see property liability insurance on the enterprise side. M&O, 13,000. Vehicle maintenance, building maintenance, fuel and supplies. Next slide. So these are your expenses by department. I just wanted you to be able to see them all together up there. That just goes over what I just went over with you, but I wanted you to be able to see them side by side. It'll be just. Oh, that's right, I see what you're saying. I was like, I'm gonna put it in there. So on the police where it says 3 new FTEs, that's not.
That's where I saw it.
Yeah, that's where you saw it. Okay. Linda just saw it. We addressed it in numbers, so it's sitting right there. Okay.
The number was
The number is correct, but the 3 new FTEs not correct.
I knew it, I just thought it.
You did see it. Okay, so that is a comparison, so you see what you're spending everywhere. Next page. Water and sewer, there's your salaries, there's your M&O. Next page, this is the proposed holiday leave schedule. I believe you already voted on it.
We already did.
Yes, so it's just left in. Next page, recommendation and fiscal impact. So you voted in the affirmative on that one. You voted in the affirmative on the second one. And voted in the affirmative on the third one for the finance person. And the, what will happen is it'll just be a contract, and the person will be half for finance and half for public works to try and clean up their accounts over there. And then in the meantime, continue to help Linda. And I would be very uncomfortable letting that position go anytime in the future. That's needed. Next slide. That is it. So Mayor, you have your cheat sheets up there. This is the time when you decide if you want to adopt the budget as is and what tax rate you want to adopt. Keep in mind that the budget up here is done with a 0.3503 tax rate, which is the same as last year's.
And I do have numbers, and I did bring numbers of the differences if you want to. I would like to. Okay, so.
Speak in the microphone.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I calculated, that's what I was doing right before I came in here. So Lori and I have got 2 sets of things, so if you do adopt it tonight, we're already prepared. So we have an ordinance that says you have a tax rate of 0.3728, or you will have an ordinance that says you're adopting 0.3503. The difference, the 0.3728, the original budgets that you all have a copy of before showed 137,046.26, which is what you would be making more than last year's budget. This year, over last year's budget, if we go with the 0.3503, it's 88,160.36. So you're looking at about a $65,000 difference between the 0.3728 and the 0.3503. So it's a difference between a 20.37% increase or a 13.10% increase. The 3.3503 is 13.10, 0.3728 is 20.37%. 20.37% or 13.10%.
So that different, there's some numbers on page 4 that had a breakdown. Are your numbers different than what's on this page 4 of the handout? Because it shows the total revenue for each one.
No, that you have on the handout is 0.3503.
They have all 3 of them on.
It has all,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they have all 3 of them, and they're all correct.
Yeah.
They're all correct.
so it looks like on this one, there's 105,000.
Well, that's because it's at 100%. What I have here is calculated at 97%. Because we've actually, that's where our collection rate was. I was kind of playing with that today. And it's actually almost at 97%. Our collection rate is actually right now about 96%.
So the difference between, if we were to do the difference.
I want to
between-
understand your question.
Huh?
I did not, what you're looking at, to make sure I'm
I was looking at this because this is the effective rate, which is at 3 points, so the revenue is 65. At the last year's rate, the revenue is 78. I look at it, there's 105, and it's just saying this is at 100%. So it's
Yeah, so the reason it's not at 100%. 100% is 219, 97% is 212. That's calculated at 212. You see that? So this is 97% on there.
Oh,
Yeah, that's why I thought you were getting, I
So
didn't
we're
want to.
105,000, basically it'll be 105,000 more. That's the rate, or if we do the rollback, it's 65.
Well, the breakout was also between debt service and ever, and I calculated it between debt service and INS. So the numbers that I have here is actual numbers between debt service and INS. That is not calculated between debt service and INS. That's just 97%.
Yeah, and that's what, okay. And so I guess that's my question. As a whole, the difference between doing the 0.3503 and the 0.3728, that's where right now, that's where I feel it's.
Yes, the difference would
It's
be.
like 40,000.
It's like 46,000 or something like that, I think. I calculated it, but that was on the handout.
41,32.
I think I got 46,000.
That's what I got, about 40.
Yeah. So it's not enough to.
Right.
Do everything to be able to say.
With the values going up like they did. Get an increase. Right. So, but they,
We did all the way back down.
right.
No, we got, the difference is 41,430.
Yeah.
You know, I've got a couple of comments. You know, I think the rollback tax rate, while it may better serve our financial situation, I don't think it better serves our citizens and our taxpayers. And I would not be supportive of the 3.728. That's the highest rate that I would be willing to support would be the adopted rate that we adopted for 2021. And I make a motion that we proceed without a tax increase, a tax rate increase with the 0.3503.
We have to approve the budget before we approve the tax rate.
Oops.
And you're going to pass, that's what is in there.
It is a 3.5.
Yeah.
So the budget that I don't.
Correct.
No.
Yeah.
I've always thought it should be the reverse.
That's not, I mean, and that's your roll call vote.
So
So
on
I
the
guess
budget,
make the motion and then I do roll call.
you don't mind speaking for this question on the budget.
Sure. Go for it.
So there's so many numbers on here, sorry, I get confused, but how much are we in the red? Or I know we're
not
trans-
in the red.
we're transferring 445 from the enterprise to the general.
Correct. The
To-
enterprise is still funding that, correct.
Okay, because,
And
and I guess to get it straight with everybody, because we keep hearing that we're general funding the enterprise because of those INS rates, which it is, but then we're going right back and giving it to them. So in reality,
This year, you are.
Right. Right, but in reality, where we're kind of where we
You're
need to be
fixing it.
on,
Yes.
on the, okay.
We
that-
already didn't even have to do that, but we already,
Right.
the
Okay,
county
no,
already
this is-
had, the appraisal district already had the break.
Right, exactly. No, that's what I mean. We just keep hearing how the general fund has, it's funding Ronnie, and in reality,
Now,
Ronnie is holding his own because of the rates we did, and that's. Well.
look at it under administrative.
We are, but that needs to come out of the enterprise.
Well, actually, we're saying that 225 from that general, and at the end of the day, we're getting 445 from enterprise back to general, so.
If you
We
want
would have paid for it if they wouldn't have done the INS and just
If the bonds haven't been structured the way that's what you're saying.
They just put it in enterprise.
But they'll be fixed.
It's the deal itself. Right. But it's moving money from one side to the other, making it all balanced, but we're thinking general.
Well, at least now we have a set of books that we can look at.
See how.
And used to, we had a Ouija board.
If you look on page 2, Counselor, if you look on page 2, the very last area where it says transfers, you're gonna be transferring yours at 445 from the debt service. You're gonna transfer that to the debt service fund, but then you also have the 288, because that 288 is coming from the general fund balance, so you still have that. So the utility fund is giving the general fund some, and the 288 is actually coming out of reserve. So you are funded, it's a balanced budget, but you're taking almost 300 grand out of the fund balance.
In order to make that.
So we're still going back and forth between the funds, slowly trying to get them.
Your enterprise fund is still not funding all of your debts.
That's.
We are moving in that direction, but you're not there.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to make sure
We can't.
Mark understood, right.
We can't, no, you can't do that.
So you see the 445 on the second page? That's from page 2. Page 2 of the general fund. That's coming from the enterprise fund, and then the 288 is coming from the revenues reserve. So in adopting the budget, you're going to be adopting the changes that we made to community aid. You're going to be adopting the COVID
They've already
waiver.
had a motion on that.
And then the other thing, and then the other thing I'll be adding is $5,000 for the revenue for the fees. So I'll be increasing the budget by $5,000.
So that needs to be in the motion.
That will be,
One other question is the 2% COLA, did that include
that's
Kelly?
already in there.
Does that include Kelly?
Yes.
It shouldn't.
That's what I wondered if she was, since she just got hired.
Yeah, well, it's in there as well.
Yeah, I would respectfully ask that I not be in there.
So that would be included. Not that you're not earning your keep.
Boy, I'll say, we're going to pay for it a couple of times.
Is there a motion?
Okay,
You ready?
with everybody's help. Okay. I make a motion that we approve ordinance 2021 with 2021 007 for the city of Blanco, setting and approving the municipal budget for 2021, 2022 fiscal year. Do you need all the rest of it, or?
I'm good with that.
Okay, you're good with that, okay. With the following amendments. Okay,
And then the changes to the community aid, the changes to the hot funds, the changes to.
Those have already been done in a motion.
We didn't.
We didn't vote on that yet.
Oh, you didn't? The motion is done. I know we need to-
we gave you directive to do, now we, so.
You're good, okay, you're good.
Good.
Okay, so we're.
Changes to community aid.
Changes to community aid, changes to the $5,000 to add to the revenues for the enterprise fund for the 3% or 3% increase on the base fees, and change to hot funds.
12,500 funds. The children advocacy and.
Why don't you just say,
As changes to the.
changes directed earlier in other funds?
Our changes.
Correct.
Directed.
Yes.
Concerning hot funds and
Community aid.
community aid.
Yes, and FEMA budget is as is, and the COVID budget as is, because they're all separate budgets.
Okay, and the FEMA budget is,
As is.
the COVID budget
As
as is.
is,
And then we were gonna take Kelly's And then you've already got the anticipated revenues from the rate change.
From the
Water.
Water.
No, that would have to add in, I'll have to add that in.
And adding in the rate change
And add that in, correct.
for the water.
4% in revenues.
Okay.
Say it.
Okay.
They did all that with the math. That's impressive.
So Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the ordinance 2021-0005, 7 of the city of Blanco, Texas, for the municipal budget for 2021-2022 with the changes that were discussed previously. And Councilmember Barron has seconded.
Okay.
And have a roll call vote.
Mayor Lumpy,
Yes.
4. Mayor Pro Tem Salcedo,
4.
Councilmember McClellan,
4.
Councilmember Smith,
4.
Councilmember Barron, 4. Councilmember Devine, 4.
Sounds like a golf game.
I don't know if you guys can appreciate it, but
I'm just taking a week off now?
next week.
Unfortunately, we are not done with this meeting, but the budget for the 2021-2022 year has been unanimously passed. Moving on. Item number 9, discussion and possible action on the 2021 proposed maintenance and operating tax rate of 0.1655 to fund the 2021-2022 budget.
So that'll change, if you go with the 0.3503, that'll change from 0.1655 to 0.1430.
So what you're doing is you're adopting the total tax rate, but you're separating out the M and O from the INS.
We're gonna, provided we
Oh, I see what we're
have a number.
The M&O rate, water rate, your tax rate. Yes.
So provided that we approve the 0.3503, then this number will be 0.1430.
Correct. And
Okay, and then subsequent to that, the item number 10, that's it.
that stays the same. The debt rate would stay the same, the
Debt rate's not gonna change.
0.073.
Okay, so now you need a motion on item 9.
Yes.
Okay.
I move we adopt the proposed maintenance and operating tax rate of 0.1430 for fiscal year 21-22.
Councilmember Barron has moved to adopt the proposed maintenance and operating tax rate of 0.1430.
Is that right? And then that's right, that goes
Point
with the
one-
0.503, right? Okay.
0.143.
That's correct.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Smith has seconded. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Roll call. Roll call.
Roll call.
September's clicking away.
Mayor Lumpy,
4.
Mayor Salcedo. Councilmember McClellan,
4.
Councilmember Smith,
4.
Councilmember Barron, 4. Councilmember Devine, 4. Pass.
The motion carries unanimously. Item 10, discussion and possible action on the 2021 proposed debt tax rate of 0.2073 to fund the 2021-2022 debt obligation. Is there a motion?
It's actually 0.2073.
She just said
Zero,
zero.
it's zero point, it's zero.
She did, she said right.
You're right.
I move we adopt the proposed debt tax rate of 0.2073 to fund the 2021-2022 debt obligation for the city of Blanco.
Councilmember Barron has moved to approve the debt tax rate of 0.2073 to fund the 2021-2022 debt obligation. Is there a second? Councilmember Smith has seconded. Roll call vote.
Mayor Longfellow,
Four.
Mayor Pro Tem Salcedo,
Four.
Councilmember McClellan,
Four.
Councilmember Smith,
Or
Councilmember Barron,
Four.
Councilmember Devon.
Ready for that third bottle?
The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 11, discussion and possible action on approval of resolution 2021 R012 of the city of Blanco, Texas, ratifying expenditures, filing of budget, repealer, severability, effective the municipal budget for fiscal year 2021, 2022, funding municipal purposes, authorizing date, and proper notice. Is there a motion?
And this will be, so that, this does, basically, this budget will raise more revenue from property taxes than last year's budget. By an amount of $88,160.36.
That's gonna be the one that's the same.
no,
It's in right.
Which is 13.10%.
not the effective rate, it's the approved rate.
Yeah, that's what that is.
I mean, I'm not done the math, you're.
We did the math.
The math was done for you here.
Well, I had another rating.
From here.
Can you restate that, Lori?
This, oh, I just restate it. This budget will raise more revenue from property taxes than last year's budget by an amount of $88,160.36, which is a 13.10% increase from last year's budget. The property tax revenue to be raised from new property added to the tax roll this year is $6,586.67.
I was looking at the wrong one.
And the tax rate is the exact same as last.
Right.
Should be in the motion.
Yes.
I am ready for a
The
motion.
one that tax rates, the next thing we'll vote.
Yeah, look at that, yeah. We're back on.
That'll be the last one.
So you moved to ratify, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
To ratify, right?
No, this is,
Yeah,
it says on approval of resolution.
Yeah.
Okay,
resolution 2021 R012, ratifying expenditures, filing budget.
Okay.
Yes, that's what we're doing right now.
so we're approving, I'll make a motion that we approve resolution 2021-R-012 of the city of Blanco, Texas, ratifying expenditures, filing for budget, repeal severability effective the municipal budget for the fiscal year 2021, 2022, funding municipal purposes.
Okay.
And do I need to state the amount of the increase? That's already.
No.
Okay, Councilmember Smith has moved to approve the resolution 2021 R012. Is there a second? Councilmember Barron has seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Mayor Lumpy,
Four.
Mayor Pro Tem Salcedo,
Four.
Councilmember McClellan,
Four.
Councilmember Smith,
Four.
Councilmember Barron, Councilmember Devine.
The motion carries unanimously. The last but not least for budget stuff, number 12, discussion and possible action on approval of ordinance 2021-008 of the city of Blanco, Texas, setting and approving the 2021 ad valorem tax rate and levy of
3503.
3503. Point cents per $100 of assessed valuation of all property, taxable property within the corporate city limits of the city of Blanco, Texas.
I move we approve and adopt ordinance 2021-0-008 of the city of Blanco, Texas, setting and approving the 2021 ad valorem tax rate and levy of 0.3503 cents per $100 of assessed valuation of all taxable properties within the corporate city limits of the city of Blanco. Exactly.
Well, all for one correct. If that's not a zero, that's a.
Oh, all right, thank you. Oh.
Okay.
So Councilmember Barron has moved to approve ordinance 2021-008. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Councilmember Smith has seconded. Roll call vote.
Mayor Lumpy,
Core,
Mayor Pro Tem Salcedo,
Four.
Councilmember McClellan,
Four.
Councilmember Smith,
Four.
Councilmember Barron,
4.
Councilmember Devon.
4. Great. The motion carries unanimously.
To make a motion that you direct Linda to sleep in late tomorrow. It's been ridiculous.
Okay, will you excuse me for the rest of the meeting so I can go and make all my changes?
The courthouse is knocking on our back door right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, item number 13, discussion and possible action on the submission of an RFQ for professional services for running the water treatment and wastewater treatment plants.
Next slide, if you would, please. So, Councilor Barron actually is the author of this movement in a way. But she asked us to consider issuing an RFQ for running of the water and wastewater system. Ronnie and I were able to grab a sample RFQ, which you have before you, and we both looked at it somewhat, and we both decided that the RFQ is what really we pick apart is when you send it back. That's where we would get more meticulous, and I stated that correctly. So we put a sample RFQ in there on what the city might issue if you all approve of it. I really see this more of a fishing expedition. I see it as, I like the idea of sending an RFQ out. Let's see what comes back. I think probably on the forefront of all of our minds is we want to make sure all of our employees are taken care of. So that's something that Ronnie and I will ensure happens if we should get that far down the line. But right now, it's simply, let's throw a poll out there, let's see what we get, and see how this comes back. I'll tell you why I like it. And I've not discussed this reason with Ronnie yet. We've just mostly talked employees. But the reason I like it is because you can attach monetary value to issues. So, if something breaks, if something overflows, if, something happens, it's not fixed within X amount of time, then they have to pay you, 10, 20, whatever $1,000 the body decides. There's a fiscal penalty associated where you can put that in there with not running it correctly. So that's one of the reasons it's attractive to me. But I think after we looked at it, we just kind of thought, you know what, let's just see what comes in because it may not even be feasible. We don't know yet. So wanted to throw the idea out there. I'm certainly in favor of a fishing expedition. See what we think. And are you in favor of a fishing? Sure. Okay, we both agree on that.
And I fully support this. I'd like for us to look at what's out there. If anybody even comes to the table, nobody may even want to take this on, but a tremendous amount of Ronnie's time and the staff time is spent on water and wastewater. And while that is the most important thing that we've got, I think that's what it comes back to. That's the most important thing we do for our citizens. And the science is changing rapidly, the regulations are changing rapidly, the infrastructure issues that we have and the engineering needs and all of those things. You can see our money revolves around what's going on with water, wastewater. If there's a better way to do it, an easier way to do it, more, with more redundancies, more backups that we can provide with just employee status alone, let's look at it. And I'd like to throw it out and see what we get. That's all it is. See who comes to the table, see what the proposal is. I have no clue whether it's affordable or whatever. And again, as Kelly said, one of our biggest things, and we've had that discussion with Ronnie, is that folks who come in would understand that they're not not firing all of our employees, bringing in new people. We're looking at how we transition over staff that's here under what might be more sophisticated guidelines and oversight than what we can provide, and better services and systems that we might be able to provide. So I'd like to send it out and see what we get. There are only two things I would say on the front page. It has until 2 a.m. on 2021, so the due date is listed here. You've got a great timeline of how we evaluate this and look at it all. But the very first page doesn't have a due date for the application, so that needs to go in there. And then the only other thing is, as I'm looking through here, we're looking at both water and wastewater. So there are several places through here where it's just references wastewater, so I just want to make sure that any place that it says wastewater be added and water treatment. Water and wastewater treatment.
So, Mayor, Council, Nick is recommending that we include something in the RFQ about operating decentralized systems in the future. I'll tell you, I didn't hear because Linda, I had to help her a little bit, but I think that somebody like Ronnie would probably flourish with a company like this because of all the credentials that he has. I'm worried about the other people. And so we'll just have to see what comes back.
And then, I'm sorry, the due date is not on the front page. It just says until 2 p.m. on 2021.
So we will fill that in.
And then adding water treatment to anywhere you see wastewater, but it doesn't.
Right.
Wastewater and water.
Okay.
And on page 4, it looks like it says contact Kelly Kinsler, and the number that is there is the fax number.
The fax number.
So I just want to make sure that we have the right number for that part. Because the fax is above it, and then, so I just want to make sure we have the right number.
We will go through it.
Nice try, Kelly.
I know.
I just want to start on page 13, I don't, this is an official document, I guess,
But it's just a sample.
right, 3.1 has a interesting address for Blanco City Hall.
Oh,
Oh,
it's because we steal these things. You know how government works.
Transparency at its best.
We're being transparent about stealing. We do steal documents.
the right city, though.
That's
Everything else is fine.
Blanco City Hall. $50, 74008.
Yeah, before this goes up, we'll come over and it'll be, presented. I don't know if it's something you want to do, I just don't see the harm in it. This is your call.
If we do this, who's going to evaluate the
So I would definitely ask for 2 of you or 1 of you to evaluate the proposals. You actually would be a good person because of your background.
We knew you wanted to do that.
It seems to me like I just heard a volunteer.
Well, it's not a one-man job.
No, you have a whole committee, so I would be on it, Ronnie would be on it, possibly Linda, council member. You guys could probably pick somebody from the city that, would understand and know this stuff.
It's not uncommon or atypical to have 5-member committee go through RFQs. They're detailed. The dumbest person in that room during that review, I'll tell you right now. I already know.
And there are retired wastewater operator people who retired here that I know used to work in that field. So I think we could recruit some additional folks to help us.
Yeah, we could even recruit, Ronnie could probably even recruit like another water person
Yeah.
that you know from.
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Mike Reed would be great.
We'll do that.
Together.
I'm just thinking about it. Sounds like you're the council volunteer.
Do I need a motion for us to send this out, or do you?
I would like that, a motion to issue the RFQ, when you want us to issue it and when you want it due.
And I like your timeline here that
Okay.
you theoretically put out. So
Okay.
I move that, the city administrator issue the RFQ for, professional services to run the water and wastewater treatment plants according to the time schedule.
As outlined.
As outlined in the sample RFQ.
What's the proposal date?
Looking for the. Yes,
Yes.
oh, it's missing on the front.
October the 5th is when you issue them.
And then
Well, but-
by the end of the.
Yeah.
We got a pre-submission conference on November 2nd,
Correct.
Right,
so one of
so she's gonna send the RFQ out October 25th.
And
And
people
they'll
have
have a man,
questions.
they'll have a chance to see it if they care, they can come for the
That's right.
conference on the 2nd. Then they have to have their proposals in
December
by the
3rd.
3rd, and then we'll evaluate them, and then if it's a doable thing, for sure.
we've got 10 days to do our evaluation, and then
That's what it looks like.
Feel free to change it in those meetings. Yeah.
How long do you want, Mike?
I don't know. If you push it back there at Christmas, and that's gonna be.
Right.
We call it somewhere, he's out, he's gone skiing, you know,
So what if we do,
December 10th, is that gonna be the regular council meeting?
why don't we move the proposal date up a little bit? I mean,
receive proposals by the
December 14th.
November 20th?
if we send it out on October 25th, I don't know what day
October 25th is a Monday.
and November the 25th is.
November the 2nd
Second.
is a Tuesday.
November the 25th.
That's
That's
Thanksgiving.
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 Okay.
That's literally Turkey Day.
Monday, either after Thanksgiving or before Thanksgiving. I mean, I feel like if these guys are gonna, if they already are
Well, but
looking
if
at.
you get it to me the Monday before Thanksgiving, then you get it to me the next day, and then I won't work on it, that's not optimal, nor.
Oh, I know.
Somebody for me to start working to,
2 days before.
run it down, that's fine. When I call,
So we need-
somebody in the, with an engineering firm for
Right.
for reference, I'm not gonna find them.
So do we want to,
You can leave it there, I don't know that you're gonna have an action item by December the 13th.
gotcha.
I mean, maybe, but they need to stand their proposals for 90 days, or 60 days anyway. I mean, they're no material, so they shouldn't have a problem with the proposal, and let us have time to do our homework. Because if we don't get it all done, then you're starting to run into Christmas. It's a hard time to.
Before you know, it's gonna be Valentine's Day.
Well, what is
Yeah.
there a reason, is there a reason it takes us a month to get this out?
No,
It's the-
no, we can get it out.
We sent it out earlier in October, in fact, this up. So we sent it out on
Okay.
the, and
Yeah,
did
that
that.
makes sense.
You need to, that month period in there is good.
Yes,
If you'll slide it backwards some,
yeah,
We
then
can
that,
do
every
that.
day, you get there away from.
Why don't-
yeah, so,
Okay, why don't you make us have it out by October 15th?
perfect, that buys
Let's
us
make
a.
you do that.
10 days,
Mhm.
and that gets,
And then we'll bring it-
Going to hear it here.
That's right, so then we bring, yeah, so then we'll have the 10th, from the 10th to the 23rd, is that what you're thinking? Or
Yeah,
move them all up?
You move them all up.
Move them all up. You figure that out.
Well, everything's done by 10 days, what are we talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, just move it all forward 10 days. And,
And then that
and
extra 10 days.
the
you want to put
initiate
between-
negotiation, with the most qualified would still be on December the 13th.
Okay.
Don't move that.
Yeah, we want to add that 10 days that we're putting it out earlier for the evaluation period. So
Got
then
it.
10 more days.
Okay, keep the last 3 days.
It's got to sit on my desk for at least 2 weeks before I can start.
Oh, I'm one of those too.
Okay.
And then we'll get to it, but we'll build a grading sheet so we're all on the same page.
It's gonna be up to you technical people. I'm just a money guy.
We can do that, we can start working on that before we get.
Yes, you hear that? Water experts.
So, do I hear a motion?
Did I have one on the? Oh,
You were going to.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
We
Okay.
got off one day, I missed you.
You numbers person, that's what it was. So anyway, so I would like to move that, I make a motion that our city administrator send out an RFQ for professional services to operate the water and wastewater treatment plants. No later to be issued no later than October the 15th. And then following the dates, time periods as outlined and attached with one change, and that is just to make sure that it is clear everywhere in the proposal that it is both wastewater and water treatment services.
Okay, we have a motion from Councilmember Barron to approve the city admin sending out a RFQ for professional services for running the water treatment and wastewater treatment plants by October 15th. Is there a second? Councilmember Devine has seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor? The motion carries unanimously. Moving on to item 14, discussion and possible action on approval of ordinance relating to permit expirations and project dormancy as authorized by chapter 245 of the Texas Local Government Code.
Mayor Council, this was also brought forth by Councilor Barron. She wants you to consider an ordinance which relates to permits that expire or projects that are dormant. Right now, you can begin a project or pull a permit in Blanco and you can just sit there forever. And so I talked to the city attorney about sample ordinance. You have that ordinance in your packet. And next slide. I think that's it. You don't know the fiscal impact, don't know what you're gonna do, and council discussion. And I thought I would turn it over to Councilor Barron. This is her baby.
And I would just say that we don't have any, I don't know that we have permit expirations as such in place on some, but I did read chapter 245 and pretty much told my subject. You can put an expiration date, but you can't put it can't be less than, go ahead, Brad, but it's pretty much what's in here. I mean, this is like way too long for my liking, but the law is the law. So.
Unfortunately, the city has no discretion to change the timelines that are set forth in chapter 245. And I just literally cut and pasted those out of 245 into this ordinance. This ordinance, Kelly mentioned we steal from other cities. This was, stolen from another city. I just updated some of the language in there to reflect the most recent version of chapter 245. And so, you can't change those deadlines. In fact, there's a case, City of Austin case, where they attempted to alter the deadlines and the appellate court said, no, sorry, you're preempted. So, however, it is very important to have permit expiration and dormancy provisions that you currently don't have. But it's very important because I've got several cases right now going on where you have, they're in the appeals court right now over whether or not a project is dormant and whether or not the permits were, they moved on it. And this goes back to permits that were originally issued in 2006.
And I think, yeah, and
It's important.
I thank you, Brad. I think what we're gonna see is that people are gonna buy land here, they're gonna file a permit. They're not gonna do anything with it, they're gonna wait, they're gonna sell the land again. Somebody else may come back thinking they can operate off that permit, and if it's been more than the number of years that at least we can statutorily require, and we've changed zoning, building code, design standards, then we can, if we have this in place, and the time is appropriate, we can ensure that they can't continue with the standards that were in that permit when they first filed it with us. They'll have to revise their plans to be consistent with anything new that might have been enacted between the time the first was filed and second.
And the ones that, go ahead. Well, I just wanted to say that the one distinction in there that's important to understand is you have one deadline for permits and one deadline for projects. And the project deadline is much longer. The permit deadline is 2 years, the project deadline is 5 years. Under Chapter 245, which is the grandfathering vesting statute, there's been a lot of litigation over that, and that is to protect property owners' rights to develop their property so that cities don't change the rules halfway through the project. And that's the purpose of Chapter 245. Project is defined as sort of the overall big picture, what are you doing, right? An individual permit, though, you may need, whatever the building permit or whatever it is, you're allowed to have that shorter 2-year deadline for those. And so if you don't move on the permit in the 2 years, then that permit goes away, but it doesn't mean necessarily that a project goes away. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that distinction.
Yeah, and the definitions are in there.
All right, well, I'm gonna reach out to, if it's appropriate, I'm gonna reach out to Ms. Moore, because she referenced the UDC.
Yes, sir.
And I certainly don't have it in front of me, but I'm familiar with the ordinances, and I haven't, when city staff would tell me what I could and couldn't do, I didn't know which book they were reading out of. But you referenced UDC 5.9 and then 2.7, I believe.
3.7.
Well, that's my writing over here. So, is it addressed in that?
It is addressed there, and my question was, is it going to, it is addressed in the UDC code. And my question was, with this ordinance override any UDC code and the ordinance that we previously had? If so, we need to update the UDC code. That's my question.
Okay, well, I think,
Because we're doing a lot of ordinances, and if it's not stipulated and addressed in the
We don't have
UDC
an
code,
ordinance.
we're not.
yeah, but we do not have an ordinance, besides the UDC, we don't have an ordinance that addresses the length of the permit.
I don't know that I know that, because we have 5 pages of ordinances and they're not cross-referenced in the UDC code. So I would have to go through all of those ordinances to find that.
They will be, we're codifying it right now, and it's going in October.
I'm just saying, at this point, I can't answer that.
But at the end of the day, if I understand it, it doesn't really matter what permit expirations we might have left in our UBC. This law says this is your permit expiration.
But if it's in conflict with the UDC, then we need to amend the UDC.
Right. But this would be, that's it. But it will give it through.
It would be important, it would be absolutely important for there to be uniformity. I will tell you that this ordinance, as a technical legal matter, the latest ordinance is going to control if there's a conflict, right? So it just is a technical statutory interpretation matter, but you don't want contradictory.
Well, if it's already addressed in our current UDC, then if it improperly addresses it, then I don't think we need to reinvent the wheel.
Well, I agree. What I don't know is whether or not what's in the UDC now is compliant with 245 and these particular deadlines. What I'm envisioning with this particular ordinance is that this ordinance is passed and incorporated into your UDC. Not as a standalone ordinance, but in addition to your UDC. That's why I left the section numbers blank.
What UDC are we under? What subject?
2019?
2020, November of 2020.
There you go. The last one that I had was
July
2019.
2019.
Yeah, so if you've updated it since
We're
then.
going to have an update, this, you'll be getting one update from UDC in your next meeting, because we'll pass it at our next one, and then if you pass this, but that can be incorporated. I just wanted to say, it is in the UDC, and we do need to get this, because when we start looking at people that come before us, we go to the UDC, we don't go to 5 pages of ordinances.
Right. So. Okay, you're getting ready to adopt a new UDC?
We're getting ready. We're getting ready to give annual update for the UDC for any changes that we recommend to you.
Okay.
So we could add this to our recommendation.
Okay, well, that would be the appropriate vehicle to come through. You only need one set of rules.
I agree. I agree. So since I'm not involved in the UDC update, I'm happy to be, but I just haven't, I'm not. So this was alerted to me that the city needed permit and project expiration order, requirement. And so that's what got put together for y'all. But it should be in the UDC.
Okay, what I'd like to do is go back to our planning and zoning commission and request that they make a recommendation to us that will properly address the duration of permit. Is that reasonable?
Well, the recommendation that they make has to be within that. It has to be. They can make another, right? So it's mainly.
So they can either give it to them or they can give it to us.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. We can either do it, give it to them, or give it to them, and they can adopt it, give it back to us.
This document can be provided to P and Z and incorporated into their new recommendation.
Absolutely.
That's the way to.
All right, then,
So you don't have to take, I guess don't take action tonight. We'll
Just give it
provide
to
it to you, and then it will be part of the new recommended update. Trying to adopt the recommendation update, that will then be.
When you folks approve it.
Yeah.
and that duration for the permit is for the project to start or for it to be started and completed?
It's the duration of, from the time that an application is received,
Right.
an administratively complete application is received and approved to move forward. Well,
No, just file.
File.
All I gotta do is
All
file.
you gotta do is file, right? And then those, whatever rules are in place on the day, time that they file an application, then from that time forward, you've got, for the project, they come to you with a preliminary plat, and it shows, a strip mall center, or a gas station, whatever, right? Pick a project. Then under 245, they've got 5 years to make any progress towards it. If it lays fallow for 5 years, 5 years in a day, they have to come back and apply for something.
But if they have initiated this under construction.
Right. The definition of progress is extremely broad. So if they do basically anything, what they can't do is they can't go get permits and sit on them for a decade and then come to you a decade later and say, we want to operate under rules that are a decade old. That they can't do. But if they've made any progress towards it,
gone and gotten other permits, turned their, that, you know, whatever. The courts have interpreted progress very broadly. They gotta do something, but they can't just sit on it and then expect it to develop under.
Why is there a time limit for them to complete the project?
Say again.
Is there a time limit for them to complete the project?
It's, well, that could be a separate, that's a separate, that's not a 245 issue. You can have, cities have, like construction, you know, you can't be under construction forever, right? And that's a separate, but that's not covered by 245. 245 is simply what rules apply to the project. And if you have a separate requirement that says, you know, from the day you turn dirt, you've got to complete your project in X amount of time, that's a different regulation.
Well, we don't have that either.
I don't know.
But we can't.
I thought that was in the contract, that's why.
That's usually-
Well,
I mean, so I can look into, that's a separate, that's not a 245 issue, let me look into that. You know, I don't want to give you something off the top of my head that's not correct. I would need to do a little bit of just verification.
we'll look at other shit.
And then you just encourage you looking at TDD.
Oh my God.
TDD, residential and commercial. So you're looking at a broad view and then all separate in this.
You know, I had a project one time that we initiated the dirt work and it required a loaner through FEMA. It took 2 years.
Sure.
Yeah, you know, 2 years later, we're sitting there. We got half the dirt work done, but when we got down towards the creek, we had to stop.
So,
I don't remember how, we may have had to get an extension on the permit.
Permit's good for 2 years, and he's already spent that. So,
So,
2 years, yeah, right?
According to that 245, we've already.
2 years for a permit to begin, for there to be progress. If there's progress within that 2-year period, then it's told, basically, that timeframe is told. But again, it's, the whole idea of it is if you get a permit, you file an application, and then you do nothing with it. And that's where, that's where the protections for the city kick in, because in the past, you would have these literally decades old permits under very, very old, inadequate regulatory schemes, right? And so that's the whole point of it.
You're talking about building permit.
I'm talking any permit.
So if somebody came in and platted a subdivision, and we said, okay, we can approve the subdivision.
Right.
And if 5 years later, they haven't turned any dirt, then that approved subdivision is no longer approved?
Correct.
That's correct.
If they've done, if it's more than just not turn dirt. If they've done, they're gonna make some, but if they file, you're right. I mean, we just to be clear, they file a subdivision under your existing subdivision regs today. All right, come in, they file it today. So whatever's in effect today, you get that. And then 6 years later, nothing has happened. Nothing. Then they come to you and they say, okay, well, now I need a permit to, you know, whatever. Some building. And you say, and we can say to them at that point, might take 5 years a day. We can say to them at that point, okay, that's great, but now you have to give us a new application and you are developing under the regulations in effect 5 years from now, right, at that point. So that's
It's going back to P&Z, get it approved.
All over again, under the rules and regulations.
All right, great.
so there's no action on
Yes,
item
I'm sorry.
14.
No action.
Moving on to item 15, discussion and possible action related to value, sale, purchase, or lease of certain real property owned by the city of Blanco.
Mayor, council, that's an action item that we should take after executive session.
We are going to move that to after executive session.
Thank you.
So at 6:38, we are going to move on to executive session in accordance with Texas Government Code Number 1, deliberations regarding real property pursuant to Chapter 551072 of the Texas Government Code for discussion regarding the value, sale, purchase, or lease of certain real property owned by the city of Blanco. And item 2, Texas Government Code, section 551071 and section 1.05, Texas Disciplinarian Rules of Professional Conduct. Confer with city attorney regarding legal issues associated with wastewater treatment plant easement. So at 6:39, we are adjourned.
This conference will now be recorded.
She's just right there.
Yeah.
Okay, at 7:19, we are back into regular session. We're going to go back to item 5, in new business, discussion and possible action related to amendment to wastewater treatment plant easement agreement with adjoining landowner. No action. And number 15, discussion and possible action related to the value, sale, purchase, or lease of certain real property owned by the city of Blanco. No action. And there was no action taken in executive session. Is there a motion to adjourn? Councilmember Smith has moved to adjourn. Is there a second? Councilmember Barron has seconded. So at 7:20 PM, we are adjourned.